This episode is brought to you by nvidhemp.com. So let's talk CBD for a minute. It's all over the news, and there are so many PGA Tour players using it, such as Phil Mickelson and Bubba Watson, to name a few, but there are many others, and now some top teachers, including myself, are taking advantage of this amazing product. But what is it exactly? Short for cannabidiol, CBD is a chemical compound from the cannabis plant. It's a naturally occurring substance that's used in products like oils and roll-ons to impart a feeling of relaxation and calm and to reduce inflammation as well. Now, it doesn't get you stoned, but it has many organic rejuvenating effects. One of my favorite brands is Envid. Their CBD products come in 3 varieties: Relief, Clarity, and Relax. Relief CBD products help relieve pain and those sore muscles. Clarity allows you to focus on those critical shots or whatever the task is at hand. And Relax CBD products are for those anxious golf moments or those moments in your life when you just need to take the edge off. I would not endorse any product that I didn't use personally, and I can tell you that I've been testing this stuff for over a month now, and it's a game changer. I take a drop of Relax right before bed, and it's helped me get some of the best sleep that I've had in years, which for those that know me, I'm up all the time with a busy mind, so it's really, really helped, and I feel so much better in the morning after just getting some deep REM sleep for a change. I also take a drop of the Clarity in the morning with my coffee to kind of get my day started, which is giving me an alertness and a focus that I have never experienced in my life. It's just unbelievable. I also use the roll-on for some sore muscles and joints after a run or a workout. Right now, I have an incredible offer for you. Go to nvidhemp.com and use the promo code GURU20, that's GURU and the number 20, for a 20% discount for life. You heard it right, 20% discount for life. Go check it out. I'm telling you, it's a game changer in golf and in your life. Now let's get to this week's episode.
It's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
You know how to cut to the core of me, Baxter. You're so wise. You're like a miniature Buddha, covered in hair.
I want to become a guru so girls will like me. Then I will like myself.
Now, before we do this, let's go over the ground rules. Rule number 1. No touching of the hair or face.
Of course.
And that's it! Now let's do this!
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 133 of the Golf Guru Show. I am your host, Jason Sutton, Director of Instruction at the beautiful Colleton River Club in Bluffton, South Carolina, where it is my job to break down high performers in the teaching and coaching business, as well as all fields of study. It's great to be back after a short hiatus, as I've been extremely busy coaching and dealing with some family stuff. All good things, I might add, that will come to light here very, very soon. But enough about me. I am beyond excited about my next guest, as we have been talking about doing this since we had dinner a few months ago at the Top 100 Summit. So I thought, what a great time to get him on the heels of one of his clients, Matthew Fitzpatrick, winning the U.S. Open last week. I'm sure everyone wants to know what is behind the added club head and ball speed gains in the past year, and this is the man that helped him get there. Of course, I am talking about Dr. Sasho Mackenzie. Sasho, in my opinion, is the top biomechanist, scientist, and researcher in the game today, and someone that I've learned so much from over the years, so he really needs no introduction, but here's a brief bio. He is the developer and co-owner of the Stack System Speed Training Aid with Marty Jertson from Ping. He is an engineering consultant for Ping and a biomechanist advisor and software developer for FootJoy. He has published over 20 golf-related research articles in scientific peer-reviewed journals and has been invited to speak to golf instructors for the PGA of Australia, Great Britain and Ireland, Spain, and the French Golf Federation, amongst many others. We've seen him here in the U.S. speaking at several of our teaching summits as well. In 2018, Dr. Mackenzie was the keynote speaker at the World Scientific Congress of Golf, which is a pretty big deal, I would think. He is a regular contributor to Golf Magazine as well. Dr. Mackenzie is a professor of sports biomechanics at St. Francis Xavier University in Nova Scotia, where he also puts his expertise into action. He's a very good player and has won back-to-back club championships at his club in 2020 and 21. We only got into about half of the questions and topics that I had in my notes and extensive research, as I had a lot, but we still went over 2 hours, so I wanted to be cognizant of his time. So there will definitely be or need to be a part 2 to this conversation because I got a lot more stuff I want to dig into. But this was such a cool and informative convo where Sasho really shares a lot about the specifics of his work with Matthew, which was a lot more coaching and teaching that I imagined. It's not just giving him a stack system. So it was really, really cool to dig into that. And also fixing his own driver yips several years ago with self-hypnosis, which was an interesting topic. And also the keys to speed production and much, much more. Most of you that have heard Sasha speak or heard him on other podcasts know of his brilliance in biomechanics and research, but I was excited to hear more about his coaching and the performance side of things, and he delivers in spades. So without further delay, let's get to my friend, the brilliant Dr. Sasho Mackenzie. Enjoy. All right, Dr. Sasho Mackenzie, welcome to the show. Finally, I know we've been talking about doing this for a while, and I'm excited to have you on. So thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, great to be here. I feel like we've already done this a few times. We just haven't hit record.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the last time we were together at the Top 100 Summit. Me, you, and Jake Thurm had an epic dinner and discussion, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we talked about, because that was the first time that you showed me Mr. Fitzpatrick's stats. I think after you guys just started working together. So we will get into that for sure, which is a big part of tonight. But I'm going to start in a place that you probably don't remember, because I know we had a few pops. But okay. We were talking about your own game, because you're a good player. You're one of the best players at your club. You've won back-to-back club championships. When's the next? Has the club championship come up yet this year? Or are you getting ready to defend?
It'll be I think mid-August.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're
looking forward to that.
You're prepping.
That's right. It's right. I'm grinding.
So you've got to tell the story about how you got the driver yips and fixed it with, as you said, self-hypnosis.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah, it's a dark time, Jason.
Sorry to bring this back up, but I think it was a fascinating story. I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah, you learn through your experiences, and this was definitely a big one. So I was a type of athlete growing up. I played volleyball at university, did track field at university, not an Olympian, but, relatively high level of sport. And I would always tend to perform better under pressure as opposed to in practice, so track and field's a great example. It would never PB in practice. It would always happen, in a performance. Same with volleyball. I would always play my best in games. So golf's different. But I guess I'd kind of always felt like, even up till my early 20s would always kind of perform better in a tournament. Just needed a little bit of edge. And there was this one year when I was out in Saskatchewan, was doing my PhD at the time, and there was a spring tournament for low handicap golfers, and it was very cold and it's kind of snowing. Conditions weren't great. And we played the Dakota Dunes was the name of the course. It was crazy long at the time. It was like 7,400 yards, but it was like, 30 degrees. So everybody was shooting in the 80s. And so it was okay. I think I was 82 the first day. And the second day, on the second hole, I blocked this drive massively. It was a weird feeling. And then, 3 off the tee, next hole was like this snipe hook. And and that was the start of a 99. So I shot 99 that day, and it was all just from crazy bad tee balls. Couldn't find the
Hmm.
fairway. Well, it was almost painful, coming in impact. And then after the round, went to the range, couldn't duplicate it. Getting through it really nice smooth swing, was fine. Warmed up for the third round. The next day, no problems. Everything felt good. First tee blocks, and just this crazy feeling
I
again.
was going to say,
And
you described the feeling. Like, can you remember
yeah,
what you said to me?
yeah, it was like when you take two magnets and reverse their polarities and try to push them together, you know? So it was almost like the club face and the ball were these like opposing magnets.
Yeah.
And the face would just go crazy. Sometimes it would, stay wide open. Other times it would slam shut. Um, and again, finished, shot another 99. So I hadn't, that was the first time I've been in the 80s, the first round in a long time. I can't remember the last time I was in the
Hmm.
90s, but the weather, the conditions and everything the first day was like, okay, everybody was shooting in the 80s. But 99 was unheard of. And it was just because it was three off the tee, constantly. So then, yeah, immediately after the round, had to go to the range again and couldn't duplicate it. I could not, if I wanted to, I couldn't hit shots that had face to path relationships that were that crazy. It would hurt to do it, and I couldn't even bring myself to hit these shots. And then so I didn't play any more tournament golf. This was in the spring. It was like May. So then I played all summer recreation with buddies, and on Fridays, and no problems. And then so I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's play in the tournament. It was September. Um, and got through the whole summer fine. Warmed up, no problem. It's not even in my head anymore. It's like, I don't know, some weird thing, right? And I had a pretty high club head speed back then. I was probably in, the high 120s. I get the ball pretty far.
Hmm.
And first tee box, it was match play. So the first few rounds of this tournament were match play. And boom, I was like, oh, it came a massive block out to the I'm a lefty, out to the left, like starts left, going left, big block slice, and I was like, oh God.
Memories came
And
back.
yeah, it came back big time. And then the scary thing is that now it was in, and it worked its way into my regular game.
Mm.
I couldn't I to this day, I never ever had issues on the range, so I couldn't duplicate on the range. But then it was in my regular, now on the course on the tee box. So I went from, low 70s, the odd time breaking par, in my, early 20s, to breaking 80 would be a miracle because I'd be getting up and down, and I'd be physically sore after playing golf. And this probably lasted for 2 or 3 years. And then I kind of settled into maybe, being a mid-handicap golfer. And anyway, I finally started doing some mental stuff, to get over it, and hypnosis was a really big part of that. It wasn't like a snap the fingers kind of fix, but it was
Yeah.
a long process. It was certainly mechanics. Everything's mechanics. So I was putting the club in a really bad position. I know more, now I know what I was doing with the club. It doesn't mean I could fix it.
Right.
Mechanically, I knew where the club was going, what was causing these issues, but that doesn't mean that, you just because you know what the mechanical fix is doesn't mean your body's not going to do the whole thing all over again. So the mental part of it is what had to be addressed. So luckily, knock on wood, luckily I've got some wood around. Even I can feel, certainly when I play golf, some very, very high levels of anxiety.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, now I'm comfortable and relaxed, but I have some coping mechanisms, so I'm able to, play some pretty big, pretty good golf. And for me, when I first won that was the first tournament I played in, the club championship 2 years ago, since I had the driver yips. I just like, I'm
Mm.
going to avoid these situations. It would come up, in rounds with someone I didn't know, but that, like, a tournament is different. Everybody knows, anybody plays it there. Even a club championship can feel, relatively speaking, like someone's U.S. Open.
Right. Sure.
it's still the same level of stress. It's all relative. When you were, you know, in junior high and you had, a championship volleyball game at the time, it felt like, the biggest game of your life and da 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 da, right? So yeah, it's nice not to have to shoot 90 anymore,
So
99.
so dig a little deeper there as far, and then we'll move on. I promise. But this was, I just remember this being like so fascinating to me and Jake.
Yeah.
The process of what you went through as far as the hypnosis piece, because you'd mentioned like you'd done a lot of research. It kind of did it on your own. You even mentioned like a play that a guy that showed up at your like high school or something. And you're like, I think
Oh
this
yeah.
is for real, right? I mean, talk a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So, well,
There's got to
in
be some
terms of,
breathing or something, right? I mean, there's
yeah, yeah. So, well, I guess it'll go all the way back to high school when I first, experienced watching people under hypnosis. We had this, it was, what do you call it? When you have these things at your high school and everybody shows up in the auditorium, there's a word for it. Help me out, Jason.
just a play, or probably, or
But
just a
like, there's a pep rally, a
oh,
rally, or
pep rally. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's what it
something
was.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's right.
I just couldn't think of the words.
Yeah.
Anyway, part of it to kind of kick this off was the school brought in this hypnotist, and everybody in their home rooms, your first class of the day, everybody raised their hand, hey, who wants to do this? And then they drew names. And some people got put in, they didn't even want their names to be in there, but we sucked some names in. So there were some people who would be petrified of public speaking, people that had never said a word to anybody in their life, very kind of introvert people that had their names called and they went up on stage, and hypnotists do this thing where they like, okay, let's see if you're actually able to be hypnotized, whatever, and head down, that kind of stuff. And the people that were left up there were some of these introverts and, people that you knew pretty well, and really, tight manners, quiet, very straight laced. And I remember this one guy, the hypnotist told him that the wall was a dam and, it was going to be leaking. And, so this guy's sweating, trying to keep these holes plugged in the wall. And we're like, yeah, is he acting? And then he went, you know, he went on this absolute tirade cursing at the principal, like, like F bombs and like, you got to get everybody out of here. This, we're all going to drown. And I was like, wow, this is pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And he also, then the hypnotist was like, hey, two other anecdotes from that was, all right, no one up here is going to ever allow anybody to drink and drive. And years later, some of the kids that were up in that stage would freak out and like grab people's keys and then not even like what was I like kind of look like what was
Oh
I
my
doing?
gosh. That's
Or
crazy.
kids that we had there's kids up there that smoked every day twice a day. They go out at lunch, and these are the kids in high school that smoked all the time, and they could never smoke a cigarette again because the guy was like, hey, you'll never smoke. So I was like, wow, this is some pretty powerful stuff. So anyway, reading more about it, people can, undergo surgery being under hypnosis. If you have a fear of spiders, a fear of heights, hypnosis can help you overcome these things. And one thing about hypnosis is the more you want the thing that hypnosis is going to help you with, the better it will work. So some people like smoking, like there's actually things they like about it, and hypnosis can still work to, say, yeah, you know what, I don't want to smoke anymore. But if it's something that you actually want to overcome or accomplish, then it can be very powerful.
So
And
you're
I
not going
certainly didn't. I certainly didn't want the driver yips.
to. All right. Well, so we'll move on. I was going to get a little bit about what you were doing there, but that's, I know it was a dark time. It was such a cool story. I was like, we're sitting there going, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
So talk about your childhood a little bit. Like how did you come up? Like what do you think influenced you to get into the profession that you're at now? And then how did that lead to golf?
Yeah. Well, big. Fan of sports growing up. Really like athletics. Love math, and physics. and I like working with people, like to optimize performance. So, kind of, I'm really doing what I like to do.
Hmm.
I'm applying. I get to work with golfers, I get to work with coaches, and I get to do a lot of math and physics every day, and figure out, the best way to do something. And golf is such a great sport for that. It's really, big in physics and engineering. The people aspect of it's great, and there's so many parts of the game that can be optimized. It's not just like like with sprinting, for example. I like track and field, and I like that stuff, but it's kind of limited in scope.
Hmm.
Whereas, and not to take anything away from track and field, I love track and field. I was a track and field coach for at least 10 years at university, but golf is so nuanced, and there's so much stuff you have to figure out. That's kind of the I'm exactly where I want to be, I guess. I'm doing what I love to do. That's reflected, I guess, in what I like to do as a kid.
Yeah, that's awesome. Who were your influences growing up in that space, or did you have professors or anybody, or just any mentors at all that we would call
Yeah,
influencers as coming through your early career?
yeah. Well, I guess right. I feel I grew up in a very small town, small province. Prince Edward Island, Canada is 145,000 people, and the town of Montague, where I grew up, was 2,000 people. But I feel like the education that I got was just as good as you could get anywhere, which is probably rare. I had really awesome teachers, really, really good education right from when I was in grade one to high school. When I showed up at university, a very good university, Dalhousie University. I didn't feel like I was behind. I felt like I was ahead because of the educational opportunities I had. And that's really important for where I ended up or where I wanted my career to go. I think if you could get to university and maybe not be well prepared, and that could be a big setback. And I was lucky too. I had a fantastic golf course to play at, Brudenell River, and it was in the 90s, it was $105 for a golf membership, and you could throw in another 45 for a full range. Juniors have full playing privileges.
Wow, that's awesome.
Your my parents would drop me off in the morning, pick me up at night. And golf was for me more of a hobby. It wasn't a serious sport. There wasn't many folks, like I look at yourself or James Hong or John Dunnigan, where juniors have a very strong, path. It's like
Right.
it can be their main sport. That wasn't so much the case, but I certainly had some great, Wednesday lessons from as all juniors
Yeah.
did to wet my whistle, and I could play as much as I wanted. So really developed a love for golf. So, certainly a credit to growing up in Prince Edward Island, Canada. Um, and when I went to do my PhD at the University of Saskatchewan, my supervisor, Eric Spriggings, was an absolute golf nut. And actually, it was kind of when you go somewhere. I was a decent student, and came with scholarship money, so it was kind of like the supervisor, the prof of where you go is trying to, sell you a bit on them, and you're trying to sell yourself. It's kind of a two-way street. And
Sure.
when I went to visit him, he was showing me he'd done a lot of research for USA Olympic diving and gymnastics, and he was like, "Hey, the more formal kind of sports," and he had a paper on his desk. Um, I was like, "Oh, that." I kind of read the title. I was like, "Oh, what's this?" And he's like, "Oh, nothing. It's kind of like more like a hobby." And he was like, "Didn't really, I don't want to show you this other stuff I'm doing. Kind of let's focus on the stuff I'm getting grant money for. The diving and gymnastics." And the paper was titled, "Moving mass distally of a golf shaft, doesn't increase clubhead speed." It was a direct shot at Burner Bubble's marketing claims.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yes, they had. I remember they had this crazy commercial where they would take a regular shaft and the bubble shaft and release them both in like a pendulum,
Yeah.
and the bubble shaft would swing faster. And that's fine and dandy in a pendulum, but if you know anything about biomechanics, which obviously my supervisor Eric Spriggins did. He was like, yeah, that's a bunch of baloney. Golf, we don't hit the ball with the pendulum. We power it with our muscles, and as soon as you move mass distally, you're increasing the moment of inertia, and you're going to swing it slower. So we did this really cool forward dynamics simulation, showing that yeah, that was what the burner bubble was claiming to do was not correct. So I was like, hey, that sounds awesome. He had these mathematical techniques to create a model of a golfer to answer questions. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Hmm.
So, and he really loved golf. We played a lot of golf together. He was kind of, I was his last student, and so we had a little golf kind of lab set up at University of Saskatchewan. He spent most of my PhD hitting golf balls in behind me. Slightly distracting when you're trying to program code. But every once in a while I'd turn around and we talk golf swing. But
But
yeah, so
that's where your thesis came in, right? Is
yeah,
that where the idea
yeah. My thesis was
was?
on customizing the flexibility of a golf shaft
Right.
to an individual golfer's swing.
Yeah.
And at the time, the technology, the high-end Enzos or the camera system I have in my lab, it wasn't quite there to be able to answer that question because there's so much variability inherent in golf. Now we've got
Right.
some very nice systems that can measure that. But to me, it was, hey, I want to keep everything the same and just isolate shaft stiffness as the variable. And you needed a mathematical model for that.
Hmm.
And my undergrad and even my PhD was kind of kinesiology. I'm not an engineer or mathematician formally in school. I took a lot of those classes, so I knew what I wanted to the question I wanted to answer, but I didn't know any of the math I needed to know to answer it. So I spent a lot of years just reading math textbooks, and it'd be
Wow.
like
So you
I'd read
caught that
it,
on the side.
yeah. So I'd read a
Interesting.
math. I'd be like, okay, I need to. I know what I want to do, but I have no idea how to do it. It's kind of like you want to build a deck, but I don't know. Do I need a skill saw? Do I need a
Yeah.
nail gun? Do I
Yeah.
do I use a hammer? So you'd go like, reading a book is kind of like learning how to use a skill saw, and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, wait a minute, no, or yeah, okay, I'll use that, or like, oh, I'm gonna learn how to use this jackhammer. You know what? I don't think now I know what this jackhammer does and how to use it. I don't need this to build my deck, right? Or even the type of wood to use. So you're like, so I read a math book. I'm like, yeah, I don't think that's the math I need to know. Let's try this math book. Or, hey, can this software do what I want? Or this programming language. So it was a lot of time just going down dead ends. That was a really exciting time though for me because you're like, trying to answer this question. I don't even know what I need to know to answer the question. I gotta go figure that out
Yeah.
first. Anyway.
Is he the one that helped you develop like a proper study? Because that was one of the questions that I was always curious about. I was like, what do you have
Yeah.
to have a proper study? Like how much subjects, how much data, how do the variables work? I mean, we don't have to dig too deep into that, but what would be a framework for if I was going to do a proper study on? And we're going to talk about this because I'm interested in the putting stuff and obviously the
Yeah.
research you've done.
Yeah, that certainly he helped a massive amount with that, and so did my undergrad honors student supervisor, Dr. John Cozy at Dalhousie. So you pick up little bits from everybody as you go along, and it's
Hmm. It's like
yeah,
teaching golf.
yeah, that's right. That's right. You might learn some neat stuff about, what the grip does from one golf instructor or one set of students, and then you learn something
Yeah.
about, okay, well, backswing positions or wrist angles or stance or, whatever, from somebody else, and it kind of all just kind of comes together. But yeah, certainly Eric helped a lot with that. And then I got lucky because my master's was a bit ambitious. The project I wanted to do, custom this forward dynamics model, and I had to write my own genetic algorithm to answer the question. So it rolled into a PhD. I didn't actually have a master's degree. So they're like, okay, but the community was like, this seems meaty enough. Let's turn it into a PhD. But my supervisor, Eric, was like, you can't do a master's and PhD at the same spot. The whole point is to go learn from somebody else. It's like,
Mm.
if you were an apprentice, you're like, all right, I'm just going to spend all my time learning from Jason Sutton and I'm going to learn everything he needs to know. You'd be like, well, you know what? You should probably go
Yeah.
listen to some other golf instructors, you're going to get a different perspective, and you're going to be a much better off as an instructor down the road if you learn from these different people. So I spent a year at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, and there was so many really good researchers there. Joe Hamill, who actually a big reason why I do so much consulting for FootJoy. He's an awesome biomechanics researcher, and Graham Caldwell. There's a whole bunch of researchers at this school where I spent a year at. I learned a ton of stuff from them. So that was stuff that I use every day in my golf research. So that was a big help.
All right, so let's get into the meat, right? So we're a week removed from Fitzpatrick winning the U.S. Open, which is pretty massive for him. It's great to see because he's been so close. But like we talked about earlier, we had the dinner, and you said I just started working with Matt a little bit, him and his coach. He needed more speed. So take us through that process of when they came to visit you, because this is the teacher part, right? This is the coaching part of like, what's your process of testing? What information did you gather from him and his coach? And then how did you proceed to help him? And then obviously this will flow nicely into your stack system, and we can talk about speed production.
Okay. So, first off, kudos to his coach, Mike Walker. He reached out to me early in the spring of 2020. And both him and Matt had realized that, okay, he's going to struggle moving up the rankings and winning majors because he was swinging at 112 miles an hour. So they would, he won a couple times, performed really well in a lot of tournaments, but then they get to a major, something that's, set up at 7,400. Maybe it's wet, like a PGA championship at Bethpage Black.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden he's hitting 4-irons and hybrids into par fours, and DJ's got a wedge. You can't play like that for 4 rounds and expect to win. And these are Mike's words. He's like, hey, do you think you could come and spend a day, at least see what's happening? So I said, sure. To be honest, it had a lot of upside. So I started looking at some of his swings, started taking, a little more detailed look just online, and Mike sent me some stuff and looking at his stats. And I got really excited because he has a ton of upside, and I really felt like I could, I immediately started formulating ideas on how we could increase his club head speed.
So what did you see? Like give us a little more detail. Like when you looked at it, and you're like, okay, I see this, this, and this. What was that?
Okay,
because he's got an unusual swing. We got to admit, he's got, he whips it way inside. He's got kind of a reverse sort of plane shift that not too many tour players have. Which I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's unique, which makes it even more special, I think, in my book.
Yeah. So I look at it first purely from a deterministic standpoint. So like literally things in my head add up to club head speed. And I've got a paper out there, if you're super keen, called how the amateur golfer delivers energy to the club. So kind of things are broken down really well in that paper if you like the nitty gritty. But I look at things like hand path length, right? So, if you traced out the path that the midpoint of the grip travels on the downswing, can we increase that? Can we increase the force that's being applied to that? Can we increase the amount of shaft rotation in the downswing and how much torque you're putting on? So I look at those things. He didn't have a particularly long swing. He didn't look like John Daly. And so I look at things that could increase hand path. So I'm like, okay, here's some options. He had his lead foot was flared out. These are not things I changed. These are things that initially I looked at. So I want to make that very clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these are not things that I mentioned to either his coach or to Matt.
Right. We just want to know what's in your brain.
Right. So I'm like, okay, well, if we're going to get him to, kind of free up the swing a bit, one thing we could do is, lift the lead heel in the backswing, like a la Francesco Molinari. There's lots of golfers to do it. So he's going to have to not flare that foot out. and it's probably going to help him if he has a little bit more narrow of a stance, kind of a wider stance, and that doesn't really help. Okay, and his tempo was super fast, which can help for average force, but it doesn't usually help for hand path length. And then it also looked like he was pushing off a lot with his trail foot vertically early in the downswing. So you want to have your center of pressure shifted. If you want to maximize the angular momentum in the vertical plane, you want to have your center of pressure early, even before you transition, shifting to your lead side while your center mass is still back. If you push really hard down with both the trail foot and lead foot, then that center of pressure doesn't shift. You have a smaller moment arm and less angular momentum in the vertical plane, lower club head speed potential. So that was something that struck me. Okay, we could, improve his pressure shift, his weight shift, for lack of a better phrasing. And then in transition, he very quickly got the arms down off of the chest. So I like to see stretches. So I like to see the low, the pelvis turning before the shoulders start turning. I like to see the shoulders turning, the torso turning before the hands start to come down. So I like to see everything being stretched and then adding a tiny bit of wrist cock as well. And in particular,
which would be a little bit of lag, right? I guess.
Yeah, lag. I want to see stretch in all those joints.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he didn't have much stretch in that lead shoulder in particular. So I could go on. There's a longer list, but we can go back to it. But let's speed things up a little bit. So then, okay, I've got this list formulated, but I want to know what his coach. So I spent at least 3 conversations, hour long each with Mike. I wanted to know what are you working on right now, in terms of the driver. So in terms of preventing misses, in terms of adding speed, do you have any thoughts? I wanted to know when does he have any shots that he hates? Like, oh God, I hate to see the snap hook. I hate to see the high block right. When he does miss shots, where does he feel it? Does he feel like something went wrong in the hands in transition? The grip didn't feel comfortable. Does he feel like he hangs on? Does he feel like he doesn't shift his weight? What does he feel? Where does, maybe he's not aware of it. Maybe it's just bad swing. I don't even know what I did. Are there any scar tissues from particular bad shots in certain tournaments? I want to know how much time a week does he put into swing technique stuff? What are his practice habits like? I wanted to look at all his stats. So to me, everything has to start from statistics. So I want to know, in particular, it starts with the 4 categories of strokes gained. So if this guy's already the best driver, it's already his best stat compared to everything else, then hey, let's not work on this. And that was one. So he was really good in all stats, like kind of top 10, top 15, even driving. He was 50th, I believe, at the time.
Probably total driving, he was okay. Like, he was
strokes
not far,
gained off
but
the tee.
Right.
Yeah, strokes gained off the tee. He may have even, I think he was 39th when I finally showed up in the spring of 2020 to work with the Bears Club, and I had this kind of package pulled out. I wanted to be clear about what we're going to work on. He was 39th in strokes gained off the tee, which isn't terrible. Right. It's pretty darn good. Certainly, you're like, oh yeah, is that preventing you from earning money? No, definitely not. But if you plotted the 39 players, it was like he was sticking out like a sore thumb in terms of club head speed, right? He was up there because he was so accurate. So I got all this information from Mike about trying to characterize Matt. And Mike was awesome because he was like, look, I'm going to be there, but you don't have to filter anything through me. A lot of times,
that's nice.
Yeah, right. A lot of times, I work through a coach, and that makes it really challenging sometimes.
I understand.
So
Can you share any of those answers, or is that sort of? I mean, I'm not
that's where
understanding.
I'm going.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Cool.
Yep. So then I had watched him warm up. Went to the Bears Club, had breakfast. Uh, Said I had a plan. I think we can get you a lot faster. You're already ranked pretty high. What are your goals? Do you want to make a lot of money or do you want to win? And he's like, I want to win. I don't, want to win stuff. He loves winning. I want to be the best in the world. Okay, well then 39th isn't going to get it done. Um, so I I have this plan of here are the 20 things that I would like to try with him, rank ordered in my head, and let's quickly, kind of go through them. So he's warmed up. I watched him at 7 irons, watched him at driver, and then I was like, all right, I want to see how fast you can swing the driver. Like how fast can you get it up? And I think he got one in the mid 113s club head speed with him swinging as hard as he possibly could. So I ruled out right away, just swing harder. But that's seriously,
Yeah.
that's an option. It is,
Yeah.
right?
For
More
sure.
effort,
Yeah.
right? You ever seen one of my presentations?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh
Hey,
yeah.
how hard can you swing? Well, shit, you just got to swing harder, son. That wasn't it. Um, and he wanted to play a fade. That was very clear. Mike had already mentioned that to me. Okay, he
Hmm.
doesn't like to see the ball go left, wants to play fade.
Does that make it a little more challenging as far as? I mean, I guess not with speed, but possibly with distance.
Yeah, possibly with
Yeah.
distance. Uh, but fair enough. I was open to that.
Yeah.
No big deal. Okay, how do you feel about, ruled out right away changing grips? He's got one hand's very strong, one hand's very weak. If you ever looked at his grip,
Yeah. I've seen it.
and he's like, no, my hands always feel great. Never feel like anything goes wrong with my hands when I hit a miss. So I'm like, well, then we're not touching that. So the grips out. Hey, you mentioned that they done stuff with the, lifting the lead heel, and I was like, okay, well, how do you feel about the left foot flare? And he's like, love it. Switched to that recently. It really helps me find fairway. So I was like, all right, that's out. Um, and crossed out changing the tempo to go with a longer hand path because there was a series of questions that got me there. But he was going to be a fast tempo player. And so it's really tough to be really high tempo and also have a long hand path.
Hmm.
There's for a few reasons those things don't go together. You can be John Daly and Ernie Els, or you could be John Rahm. You can't kind of be both. And he was going to be he was going to be a Fitzpatrick. He was going to have a really fast tempo. So that means that we need to figure out a way to put more force along the hand path. And he wanted to play a fade. And so now I'm thinking in my head, okay, well, can we crank things up in the vertical plane because that was something where he clearly didn't have an optimized weight shift. Let me throw a caveat in there.
Yeah.
We're not trying. I feel freedom in a sense because I don't need to take this player to swing at 142. He's swinging at 112. If the goal was long drive and I had to maximize and optimize everything for speed, then probably he could get up to 142. So I look at things also long term. We're going to get back to the mechanical stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, he's 25. I'm like, where can we get him by the time he's 27, 28, right? And in fact, you could even peak out. He could potentially peak out in club head speed by the time he's 30. Realistic, it's probably going to be 27, 28, 2-3 years from where we are right now. And I don't need him to be at 142 then. I need him to be at 122. Unless things really change in the PGA Tour with course setups, things start to kind of hit a bit of an asymptote, like things start to level off in terms of your gains. Bryson at 132 clubhead speed wasn't gaining 3 strokes on the field off the tee every round. He was gaining, a little bit over 1. That's where Fitzpatrick is right now.
Hmm.
So it's not like, hey, you go from 112 to 122, you gain a stroke on the field, and you go from 122 to 132, you gain 2 strokes every round. No, it's not. It doesn't happen like that. So I only need to get him to 122, so we got a lot of things to play with here. Okay. So I don't need to maximize everything. So he he had some things that he did not like moving off the ball.
Yeah, it's
For a
pretty
lot,
centered.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, here's another guiding principle. Sorry, that I should throw out there.
Yeah.
So he's 39th in the world in strokes gained off the tee. There's a lot of downside to making changes.
Right. Yeah, you could definitely
Um,
make him worse.
yep. And I don't want any tour player, unless they're really desperate, I should, maybe desperate is not the great word, but someone who's like, okay, last straws, like maybe kind of like a lot of the guys switching over to live right now.
Right.
Like maybe like even Ricky Fowler's kind of turned it around, but some guys, who are like, okay, we were ranked 10th and now,
Yeah.
30th, 80th, 190th. You're like, okay, we're willing to make some bigger gambles here.
Mhm.
But Matt was still kind of arguably trending up, maybe flattening out a bit. So I never want those type of players to make any mechanical swing change that's uncomfortable. The onus is on me. I've got this big list of things that can help him swing faster. I need to be able to find some of those things and some ways to have him do those things that he feels, yeah, that's comfortable. And I want to do this because it's going to have a positive result. So let me set up the scenario. You get on hole 5, it's a par 4, and you make this swing. And you told me, Jason, this is for golf instructors, right?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so you make we've all had this at some point in our golfing careers. You hit the ball, feels solid. Boy, it felt good, but you just know like, this is going to be a hook. But boy, it felt good. It felt it felt
Yeah.
powerful. It felt comfortable. It felt natural. And there it goes. Starts left, going left. Damn it. So then you got this swing fix you're working on to get rid of this, this hook. You're a little more upright. You're changing some wrist angles at the top. Maybe your grip's a little different. So here comes another par 4. It's 3 holes later. It's into the wind. You need a big drive, and you're like, okay, more upright, a little different grip, and you have to make this uncomfortable move to hit the shot you want. That sucks. I don't want anybody doing that. Now, that is this type of player.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Now
so
that
let me
goes again.
let me stop you right there, because that's one of the things that probably a lot of coaches out there would disagree
Yep.
in the learning process, right? Like I get what you're saying, but I think there's a space in between when you administer that change that we're trying to make to get rid of that shot, to where you get enough reps, you can do enough drills or whatever your training style is, to where it shouldn't feel that uncomfortable to make that change. You should just know, this is what happened. This is my old pattern. This is what the new pattern should feel like. Does that make sense at all?
Oh yeah, because that's, I just gave a lesson to a 63-year-old female who was hooking everything off the planet, and her swing was great, everything was pretty good, but her grip was ridiculously strong,
Right.
and she was like VJ throwing the club at, so really strong grip, so she would hold it fine at address, but then this kind of really relaxed flip throw action that was great for speed, but the face was closed 8 degrees, hook.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, this isn't going to be comfortable, but we can either, we got to weaken your grip, or, or we got to do some other stuff that's even going to be more challenging. I get that. I'm totally fine with that.
Yeah.
But I think you have to be, I know a reasonable amount about golf biomechanics and swing mechanics in general. I feel confident. I can say that now because I got I have a PhD and I feel like I've helped people at the highest level. I could just all be luck. Could be. I'm aware of that. But I feel like you have to have Rain Man-like skills to look at someone like Fitzpatrick, who's 39th in the world, 39th best driver in the world, and say, I'm going to do something that's uncomfortable and I'm confident this will make you better. That's like, I call bullshit. I'll call bullshit every time, probably because I know too much about, how, I don't, so because I think that that's such a risk. Like I said, maybe if you are if you're 280th in the world and you were ranked 10th,
Yeah.
then that's fair, but not where he was at. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm just saying, like, once you tell him to do something, the very next swing, there's no way that's going to feel comfortable. I wouldn't think. You tell him to
Well,
lift his left heel and he's never done it, even though
yeah.
you know it's right. There's no way that's going to feel good.
Now it's possible. It's possible.
That's all I'm saying. It's just a
Yeah.
teaching thing.
I'm with you. And so,
it's not. I'm not challenging you at all.
No, I hope you. It's a great thing to challenge me on.
No, it's
probably
just,
should be challenged on it. But let me.
Yeah, keep going. I don't want to interrupt. I'm just throwing because we've spent a lot of time together. I've seen you talk and heard this, and I've heard you say that. I'm like, that's not. I don't quite agree with that part because it takes some time to get through the uncomfortable ability of a change until it doesn't become uncomfortable and it becomes the new pattern. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I'm saying I do not want to go down that road with someone who's 39th in the world in that particular skill.
Gotcha. Okay.
Because I think now maybe eventually I run into someone where I run out of ideas. So I've got like literally 20 mechanical things that I could potentially change that would lead to increased club head speed. And I've got at least 3 ways that I can communicate each of those 20 mechanical changes. So I got 60 options.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that some of those are going to feel comfortable. And I believe I can communicate them in a way that will, because when you do something right and the club goes faster, you're like, yeah, that felt good.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I'm with you. Yeah. All right. Continue on what you did with them.
Yeah. So, I didn't want to touch anything in the vertical plane, even though that was clearly a place where more speed could be generated. He had flat swing, so if we're going to say, all right, we need more angular momentum in the vertical plane, and in order for that to add to club head speed, then we need to make his swing plane more vertical. If you are perfectly horizontal, if you're a baseball player and that bat is 100% horizontal, and you add more angular momentum in the vertical plane, it's not going to increase your bat speed.
Right.
So if you're really flat, and you're going to try to do a better job of, moving the center of pressure relative to the center of mass or increasing your vertical force to get more angular momentum in that plane, then you better be willing to change the plane the club's moving on so that can be realized into more club head speed. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of reasons, I wasn't touching that because a lot of stuff that he really liked, that he was comfortable with. I'm a big believer in where you feel the pressure in the grip in the hands, and the strength of your grip, along with where the club is positioned in transition, can change where you feel those pressures. So if you go to more upright, and now like I want to feel the pressure on the thumb of the lead hand in transition, and then it's got to flip to the index finger of the trail hand. But if you change the plane of the swing, then that's going to feel different. The grip, I really loved his grip. Mm-hmm. He never had any issues with how his hands felt. There was some real magic going on there with how fast he was whipping that thing around in transition. So I couldn't touch that. Then that means that we can't change the swing plane. If we can't change the swing plane, then there's no point in going after changing the angular momentum in the vertical plane.
Yeah.
And he liked feeling like he was centered. So moving him off the ball just seemed like a disaster. He felt if he moved off the ball, then he was never going to get back to the ball. And so it's just like a big can of worms with a whole lot of bad outcomes that I was staring at.
Those two seem to match up, right? A little flatter swing, a little center pivot, like definitely match up. You want to use that term.
Right.
It makes sense.
So I'm going with, okay, let's see if we can get a little bit more angular momentum in the system in the horizontal plane. So that means kind of the pushing, the pulling of the feet on the ground. Mm-hmm. If you look at, there's a great, you could Google it. There's like this awesome video sequence of Tiger Woods from like 1997 to like 2014. Maybe it's in higher, 2018. And show him hitting driver after driver after driver. And I show this as part of a ground reaction force presentation. And his lead foot is always jumping. You could always like slide a Golf Digest or a Golf magazine under his lead foot for a split second, and it always hops back a bit. Lots of Kyle Berkshire and these long drive guys, it's massive,
they all do
right?
it. Yeah.
But most of the really good drivers of the golf ball push so hard with that lead foot towards the target in transition that there's that little pop out. No good golfer ever steps forward. Lots of high handicappers do.
Right.
But there's always that lead foot's always pushing a little bit harder towards the target than the trail foot's pulling away from the target line. You can see that for those that maybe aren't big into ground reaction force, like Scotty Scheffler's pulling that trail foot back. He loses friction, so you can see it slip behind him. Greg Norman does that. The lead foot is pushing in the opposite direction to create this angular momentum in the horizontal plane. So he's comfortable doing that, but he really wasn't optimizing it. So he likes to play a fade. But I want, through transition, the last bit of the downswing, I want him getting that lead side ripping more left.
Gotcha.
But he's already fading the ball. So if he does that, now it's turning into a slice. So I can't just say, okay, I want you to really push hard with that trail foot. That's going to increase the average force along the hand path late in the swing, but that's going to change his path. This is no good. So I had him, okay, let's hit some big rope hook draws. Okay, like I want to see, like, and he's always got, a flight scope, a TrackMan, and a quad. He's got them all. Which one do you want to turn on? So he's got, there's no lack of data. All right, and I want you to swing. So I want to see these big rope hooks.
So how quickly could he do that?
Instantly.
Yeah, they're so amazing, right?
Yeah,
you can
absolutely.
flip that path real quick.
Yeah, absolutely. And so immediately what I could see was that in transition, the force on the grip jumps up big time because he's keeping the same amount of force in the last half of the downswing, but in order to make that path go from 2 left to 8 out to 8 right, he's got to be pulling harder on that grip in transition.
I was about to say, how did you know he was doing that? Are you just visually watching it, or you just know by the way the center of mass is moving, or relative to the hand path? Yeah,
watching it, so you go, okay,
right.
Look, it's definitely more out.
Yeah,
right. And he's not falling forward, so it's not like he's pulling less left. His finish is looking the same, so the force on the grip through impact's about the same. But it's got to be higher in transition because the club is definitely moving out, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I'm like, you comfortable with that? He's like, yeah, I could fire that club head out there all day. I'm like, all right, awesome. Now I need you to transition like you're hitting that rope hook, but I need that path number to be 2 left, not 8.
Yeah.
Okay. And so start the backswing. I want you to start the backswing and thinking draw, just as you transition, big draw. And then now I want you to think, make that path 2 left. And I want you to, I hate a hold off fade, especially for a guy who's swinging at 112. Fine for Bubba. You can, back in the day when you could swing at, 126 and you want to do a hold off fade and you have magic hands and your club head speed drops to 119. Hey, no problem.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, but hold off fades when you know the speed is no good. So I was like, look, and I want you to try and close that face as hard as you can. Like I want transition, rope hook, and I want you to release the shit out of it. But at the same time, right? So there's no hold off fade. It's like you are closing that face, you're slamming that face shot hard while you're pulling left as hard as you can. And so he could not, he couldn't hit a fade. They were all these tiny draws, and he was comfortable with it, liked it right away, and I like putting a player in a position where they feel like they can't overdo something.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
It's like you want the ball, but you need the bowling ball to be in the gutter, and no matter how hard you fire it, like let's say the right gutter, no matter how hard you fire it into the gutter, it stays in the gutter. So it's a very assertive thing. You're not trying to manage anything. You're like, hit this really hard, massive draw, and then rip this thing left like it's nobody's business while releasing hard. So it's a very assertive move. So right away he jumped up to 116.
And he was okay hitting the draw, right? Like he changed a little bit of his mindset.
Yeah, he didn't really like it,
Oh,
but
okay.
that's good. In my opinion, that's good because he's working hard not to draw it.
Gotcha.
And so what can happen is that if you do, sometimes you can cheat, right? So what you can't do is cheat and kind of go, okay, well, I'm not going to draw transition. I'm going to have the club a little bit steeper. I'm not going to bring it back as flat. I'm not going to, kind of lay off the center mass as much. And now you're kind of setting up more for like a neutral shot or a fade, and then you rip left, and then it's this wipey slice. Can't do that. You've cheated, right?
Right.
You need to, so like that's important to tell the player, like, and you can feel it. That draw, you kind of got that heavier feeling in the trail hand in transition. You're like, all right, I'm slinging this thing out there. And so what I do is things have to be documented. He's awesome with taking stats. He's got a great stats guy that designs all his practices as well, Steve Robinson. So he was there the whole time. So I said everything's done with a strokes gain calculation. So we hit before we got into this stuff. After he was warmed up, I had him hit 14 drives. So he hit a driver. We set up a fairway. Hits a drive, and it has to be. We pick. There was a par four. I can't remember now. At Bethpage Black. He just got finished playing Bethpage. Or no, sorry, I apologize. This was right before the first time we went was right before the PGA Championship. So he was already kind of thinking about some of the holes. It was a par four. I wish I could remember the number. But I like par fours at around 400 yards to imagine you set up a fairway in the driving range, and you pick your stock shot, and you're going to try to hit it. Boom, make your driver swing, record it on your flight scope or your TrackMan or your quad. Go hit a 7-iron or a chip, go hit a putt, come back, hit another drive. So you get 14 drives.
Gotcha.
And I do a strokes gain calculation on those 14 drives. There's
So you
one
got some
number.
spacing.
I got one number. This is your strokes gained for your stock driver shot on this par four. Okay, and now we're going to repeat it, but with this new move, right? Where we're draw transition and fade, and we have a strokes gain number. And then maybe it's not better right off the bat. Maybe
I was going to say, how much time elapsed between when you worked on it to when you're testing it now?
Yeah, so that day. This is our baseline.
But like how long?
Right?
Like 6 hours, 8 hours, 30 minutes?
Yeah, it was probably did two. So probably lots of questions, and he was probably hitting 7-irons and warming up for probably 45 minutes before we did his baseline driver stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we worked on kind of going through, okay, well, foot flared out, no, this, that, no. And it's like one or two swings. That's uncomfortable, scrap it. Or something I see, I don't like it, scrap it. And then so it was probably 2.5, 3 hours in, and we're like, all right, this is a good swing. The big draw, try to rip it left. Okay, we're understanding each other. I understand his language, his feels, the best part. Mike Walker was there asking lots of questions too. He's right there. And so, yep. And he would help translate some of what Matt was saying. Well, I feel this, I feel whatever, some phrase that they've been using. And I was like, what the hell does that mean? And we'd have some, okay, I understand what you're talking about now.
Yeah.
And so this was all before lunch. And then we do the strokes game with this new swing. And that's our baseline. And then the deal is, okay, you do these tests in practice, these strokes gain tests, and once your practice is 2 to 3 practices with this new one, the strokes gain number's better, and then bring it to the course, in the pro-am, right? Anyway, long story short, he kind of liked that. He called it the bomb, so he started putting it into play over the summer, and then feels start to change. So he kind of, towards the end of the summer, it was kind of like, well, I'm not, end of the fall, I'm not really using the bomb anymore. Kind of my own swing feels pretty good. And I'll never know, we didn't track these things, necessarily with an AMM 3D or anything, just using my eyes. But your feels change. What feels like, oh, my swing feels upright. And then you're like, oh, all of a sudden now you're too upright because you keep looking for that feel, right? So anyway, your feels change. So my guess is that the bomb swing just became a little bit more normal, and there's certainly some things
Yeah,
now
the
that I,
baseline changed, right?
yeah, it
You got
shifts.
higher.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Yep. But then that fall, and it was still a specialized swing. It was one day of mechanic stuff, right?
Hmm.
Um, and I was kind of trying to sell myself on him, so I was pretty happy that he was able to swing, almost, we increased the speed with some mechanical changes. But then in the fall, played in the Masters that year was in November. I believe it was in November. It was
Right.
October.
When DJ
It
won.
was, yeah, the fall one.
Right.
And I think he, a bit tired, kind of maybe lost the feels a bit. And guys were bombing it, and he wasn't bombing it. So it was like, okay, that was just a one-off. And then in the fall, it was like, all right, let's make this a permanent thing. Like we like what happened in the spring, so come on down for more session. COVID was in full effect, and in Canada, it was like, something from Total Recall, where it was like you go to Canada, you needed to like, change your skin and get a blood transfusion and all that stuff. So
Yeah, you couldn't
like
get out.
you could, and if you got out, then getting back in was like you drank Javax and like shaved your head and stuff. So it was pretty intense. So I had three kids, and they were all doing hockey and stuff, and it was busy. But I was like, all right, this seems like a great opportunity. I saw a ton of potential. So I went down, spent a day with him, and then had a quarantine in the woods in Canada for 2 weeks after I got back. Anyway,
Yeah.
so went down and I was like, all right, let's see where your speed's at. So fully warmed up, and he could not crack like 112.
Oh God.
Yeah, I could tell the move was low. It was like, oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
And this is like, the bomb, it's not really jamming anymore. And I should say that he would only pull the bomb out on certain holes. So it wasn't like I'm using this thing all the time. So he'd
Yeah.
like, okay, I can play a draw here. I know it's going to draw, so I'll pull out the bomb. So it was like, once or twice around, pretty happy with it. But then kind of, yeah, it wasn't really flying at Augusta for sure. So then I could see that some of the feels we had, the draw transition, this wasn't working. He was definitely doing the draw transition. That was good, but I really want him to ramp up what was happening through impact.
Hmm.
At least visually what was happening to him, but what he would feel. So did this thing where I want him to feel like he was really ripping the grip left. So had him take the club about 6 inches past where the impact was, and I grabbed the club head, and I said, all right, I needed more pull to come from the legs, not the arms. At
Hmm.
least that's where it's feeling from. So I was like, all right, imagine I'm falling into a pool here, okay, and I need you to pull me out of the pool. So it's not where he needed to pull in the swing, but it was how he was going to feel it. So I wanted to come from the leg through extending the knee, extending the hip, pulling the left shoulder up and back,
Yeah.
and feel it through the ground. So yeah, pull me out of the pool, and
Yeah, we call that
boom,
the running backwards move. I think we talked about that at dinner. It was like, yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of the way it is. It's like Dr. Kwan, I think, coined that. It's like your left
running
foot's,
back. Yeah,
yeah,
that's good.
you're
Yeah, I
running
like that.
backwards. Yeah.
I like that.
Hmm.
Running backwards. Yeah, exactly. And boom, 116. He smart. You could see he was
Nice.
like, oh, he literally. I remember he looked at Mike and he was like, I'm back. I'm back. So that was important to get, some buy-in. Okay, and I got a lot. He looked kind of like I thought it was like some neural fatigue. He's burned out, and I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to do anything. This is just gonna
Yeah.
suck, and I'm gonna go home, and this is gonna suck. So I was pumped. He was pumped, and then I decided, if now that I'm in long term, what I really want to do is some stack training.
Right. I was gonna say,
Right?
when's the stat come in?
Yeah, I was like, look,
The buy-in.
yeah. So I felt like this 116 was where we were going to get with mechanics.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, great. I could do some crazy stuff and we could have him swinging at 125, but it was not going to be comfortable, and that was not going to be the way moving forward. So then uh, in the afternoon, I just ran him through a stack protocol. So I had a prototype. It was like lead tape, nuts and bolts. So I put together at Home Depot, and an Excel spreadsheet and a little radar, um, and ran them through the protocol at the time. And I was like, look, this is the plan. We're going to get to 120, but it's going to take a couple of years. Um, okay. So at that time there was no app. Um, and it was just an Excel spreadsheet where I'd send him the workout. He'd do the workout, but I need to know the speeds
Hmm.
and what he swung with each weight. So he'd fill out the spreadsheet, and then I'd crunch the numbers because as you change, I want the workouts to change. So
Yeah.
then, hey, here's your next workout. And then luckily we got an app, and I actually got an actual stack. Like Marty had, come on board, and we got some prototypes. So had an actual stack with a yellow threaded handle and actual weights and an app, and it was awesome.
Yeah, it is.
And then he actually lost it. I think it was in Abu Dhabi, the only stack that was in existence, and it was lost. So we had to send
Oh
him like
no.
our only other prototype. Anyway, that worked out fine.
Yeah.
And then he got up to eighth in strokes gained off the tee that June, which was awesome. He was actually, I got a screenshot. It was great because Rory was 11th. And that day in November when I was down there working with the Bears Club, the only other person on the range was Rory. And I know damn well he'd angled himself so that instead of hitting straight down range, so you'd see Matt's ball land, and then you'd see this other one land like 50 yards down, and you're like, okay, I know
It's
what you're
Big D
doing.
and them.
Yeah, exactly. He's like hitting on an angle and just
Oh my
landing them
God.
past. So that was like, dude, if you're beating Rory in strokes gained off the tee, things aren't that bad.
Right.
But to be honest, you get faster, and it does require some adjustments to your irons as well. Your gaps are going to change. You're going to be swinging them faster. Um, and his strokes gained had dropped approach. Was
Hmm.
it due to the increased speed, or was it, look, strokes gained approach can drop for a lot of reasons. But hey, fair enough. Maybe it was due to the speed training. Don't know. But anyway, he got away from the speed training, and maybe he got busy with other things over the summer. And strokes gained approach really didn't improve, but strokes gained off the tee definitely got worse. Um, and I didn't want to at that point push too hard, but I was like, okay, let's at least get the strokes gained up the tee back up. So we picked it back up in the fall, and off the tee it started to improve. And he won the Andalusia Masters, and he likes the
Hmm.
feeling of how the driver feels. When he's doing the stack training, he feels like he owns it. He feels like he's in more control. So not only is he hitting it further, he feels like he's more accurate. And then since then, it's just been a slow, steady march up, like half a mile per hour here, a mile per hour there. Maybe nothing changes for a month or two, and then there's 2 miles per hour. And I went down to the Masters this year, and he was second strokes gained off the tee at the Masters.
Nice.
Like watching him
Yeah.
play, and he was as far as anybody. And then, at the RBC Canadian Open, he was averaging 119 club hits average. These
Wow.
aren't like his
Yeah.
fastest. This is what he was averaging. It was like 118.76.
Yeah. They were
Um,
blowing it up that he gained 5 mile an hour ball speed
yeah,
this last week, and he was hitting it, and he was long. It was longer than DJ.
yeah. So he was, Will Zalatoris is not a short guy,
No, he hits it
but
pretty. He hits it deep.
and he was hitting it past Will all day on Sunday. I mean, to me, it was what was so gratifying to me was, well, there's a few things in the U.S. Open, but pumped that first drive. He kind of had, a bit of the pulls at the PGA Championship. And it's just got to keep that body turning. Anyway, first tee ball, U.S. Open just hammered it on Sunday, and then it gets to that drivable par four into the wind, cold. No one else drove the green, and he hits 181 ball speed under the maximum pressure, and
Hmm.
he picks up the tee. Like just eagle putt,
Yeah.
and then the par five in the front, drives it past Will. Will's got to lay up, and he smokes a 3-wood onto the green. Like that was
Yeah.
620 into the wind. Like Only you mean that's not a fluke. Like you are
No.
legitimately one of the you're a long bomber. If you're the only guy
Yeah.
driving a par four on a Sunday,
It's a game changer
it's a game changer,
for
you
sure.
know.
Yeah.
And I got to add that so Steve Robson does his stats and plans it all his practicing, which is awesome. And Matt Roberts is his trainer. And Matt was early on. Uh, um, you know, critical in a very good way. Like, okay, well, this speed training is going to cut into some of the weight stuff we're doing, and also Matt's got his neck muscles can cramp up a bit, and certainly doing some of the stack training. We had to take the odd week break here or there because his neck would cramp up,
Hmm.
and so it's a bit of a risk. But kudos to Matt Roberts. He's a physio, and he's like, all right, well, let's just keep his neck healthy then. Like this is clearly helping, so let's instead of saying stop it and let's go do some other stuff, it's like, all right, this is helping, so we gotta we gotta figure out a way to allow him to keep training. And so, it's really been a very Matt's been awesome. Matt Fitzpatrick's been awesome to work with. The whole team, like right away, like I was really jazzed that I got called back in November, um, because there's very few people that I want to work with.
Right.
It's like there's a lot of players out there that just um, don't want to do the stuff you need to do. It's like, all right,
Yeah.
I'll do this for a month. Well,
Have you got any more calls? You don't have to
yeah,
tell me who.
yeah, there was already a lot of, there's probably about 30 tour pros using it and a lot with some
No, I'm just saying as
success.
far as like with you just personally doing that. I mean, that's a bit more above and beyond just like giving them a stack.
Yeah.
I mean,
I,
actually
I,
being a coach.
yeah, I give most tour players, a good hour, half hour, at least a discussion about the philosophy, but there's a few players that I'm, kind of working with a bit now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So give us a brief outline of like how the stack started. The whole. I as we met at the Top 100 Summit, I'd heard about it because it was fairly new still, right? And you were still kind of starting to get it going. And then once I saw your presentation, I actually filmed it and I've been showing it to like all my students. So like it made more sense of the
Mm,
research you've done, all the work you've put in the last 5 years. Because that's what I want. I want something that has a bit more meat and science behind it to where I know, okay, this is why we're doing what we're doing. So if you can kind of give us the brief
uh,
outline of like all that, I mean, we got all the time in
yeah.
the world, but I mean, I would love for you to
Well,
talk about that.
I can tell you that there's definitely not been another golf training aid that's been studied this much.
Right.
100%. I'm very confident in that. And I'm also confident that there's no speed training system in any sport that has had this much experimental research done. Because at this point, we've got, I guess, about 10,000 users. But every one of those users is in a study. So you go in, you do a baseline test, and you do the training. So we know what you did in the pre-test. We know your training. I know when you train. I know your breaks. I know how fast you swung every weight. I know how much days you take between sessions. And then I have your post-test. So I can give you a program that's a slight variation of these other 300 people. And then, so there's always these experiments being run behind the scenes. So, like, over the last 2 years, even, we've changed our rest times because we can see that the rest times weren't optimal to start with. And then we can also slightly tweak a whole bunch of stuff, come up with new programs. Anyway, so um, it, it started because of my track and field background. So everybody knows that the best way to get faster in those companies is just to run fast, right? Hey, you can get really fast just by running fast. Um, you can improve a lot, I should say. But then you kind of like, well, there's got to be some other types of training I can do. So you can pick up your driver and just swing it as hard as you can, and most people will get a little bit faster, but they don't get as quick as they can, and they'll plateau faster. So then with track and field, and a lot of other sports, you'll see people doing overload and over speed training. And it's about knowing, it's not just about, all right, let's tow a sled or let's get pulled. There's some great research done in Scandinavia about, okay, let's get precise the load we want you being pulled by and precise the resistance that you're towing to maximize these gains in sprint speed. So I want to know, what are the forces and torques you're applying to the grip when you swing your driver? And then I want to know what weight of club, and it's not just weight, it's where's the center of mass, what's the moment of inertia, and what's the overall mass. So there's three things that we can manipulate. So I want to know, how do I manipulate those to get just the right increase in force and just the right increase in torque? And the torque and the force don't increase the same way. So you're targeting a slight overload in torque and a slight overload in force with different stack weights. But we also want to stimulate over speed. So I want to know, what is the right loading to get you swinging at just the right percentage faster than your driver. So when I first started, it was like, okay, let's see, do people get, how heavy can I make something before gains start to drop, right? How light can I make something before gains start to drop? So this first studies were like, hey, this group just swings heavy stuff, this group just swings light stuff. And then it was, okay, well, we kind of know what the limits are and we kind of know what the loads are being applied. Okay, well, let's now try, do we do heavy stuff first, followed by light stuff? Do we do light stuff and heavy stuff in the same session? And what should the rest be, right? So iteratively, you do these studies, and 6 years down the road, you feel pretty confident you got some stuff that can work, and you bake it into an app. And so now what's awesome is you do this baseline test, and not everybody needs to do the exact, should do the same amount of overload to overspeed. So if you swing stuff that's lighter than your driver really, really fast, relatively speaking, and stuff that's heavier, kind of slow, then that pushes you into one type of program. And then if it's the reverse, you get pushed into another type of program. But then as you adapt during the program, we don't want you stuck in the static program. So I need to know how fast you're swinging those weights today in this session today, so I can plan your workout for the next session. Because it's going to change. If you go into the gym today, and people who lift weights will know this, if you go into the gym today and you're supposed to be doing 80 pounds for a set of 6, and you crank out 8, well, then the next workout you shouldn't be doing 80 pounds. You got to change the weight.
Right.
So we adjust that, and we got some, really cool stuff where if you don't work out, you're supposed to, work out every 2 or 3 days. So we tell you when to work out. Mm-hmm. If you miss a week or so, then the app knows that, and it adjusts the workout. So you don't get your workout volume and intensity drops, so it eases you back in. And then after you complete a program, you do another progress check. It's like a baseline. We call it a progress check to see, okay, now where are your weaknesses? And the app will come up with a rank ordered list of programs. The program at the top is the one that's going to give you the greatest probability to continue to see speed gains.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I've taken a few of my students through some of the workouts, and like building in the rest time, I think is valuable. And then being able to, like you said in your presentation, basically everything is a research project for you, but like it's your brain, right? So you're like running the whole thing. So exactly what people are doing, and then you're able to reach out and go, what's going on? Why are you not getting it? When do you work? And you talked about the one guy that was doing CrossFit like prior to the stacked workout. That's not going to work, bro. You don't want to go in gassed, right? You want to have them at the right time. So it's there's a lot of moving parts there. But
and we've got
so cool.
And so, what's awesome now is it's okay. Whoa, that's a bad idea. We got to educate people on that. So now we've got a video it's like, hey, coordinating other conditioning with the stack. It's like a 8-minute video, and you're like, oh, okay. And then we've got one called, stack training in season. We have one called certifying your warm up. So we've addressed all these pain points for people. And we also have what's awesome is this concept of a grit score as well. So we've got these optimum set rests, rep rests, and session rests, right? And you can choose to take as much or little rest as you want. You don't have to follow the program, but we know that. And so then we can see, hey, with 10,000 users, hey, here are 400 users that took more time than they should. Well, let's compare them to the people that took the right amount of time. Hey, look, the right amount of time is faster. But we actually had some who would take a little bit less time, right? Like we've got a set rest of 3 minutes. And for some of the workouts, people would only do 2. And so we can actually do a statistical analysis, say, you know what, actually, these people kind of did a little bit better. So we got to reduce that set rest.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't do a study like that. You can't, at a university, you'd be lucky to do a study with 30 people in each group. Right. But now I can do a study with 300 people in each group, and I know what the rest are. So we got this grit score. It's an overall measure of how well you're adhering to the rest. So I'll have someone be like, hey, I've plateaued, and I'll go in and look, and I'm like, your grit score is 70%. Like you get tossed out of our study below 90%, because then you're not adhering to the program.
So they're not taking enough time.
Yeah, or they're not taking enough time, or they're taking too much time.
Gotcha. Yeah. They're not doing what they've been told.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I've built in the programming now is so cool. People are like, well, why would I trust it? I trust it. So I do the workouts. There's so many factors that go into determining what the workout should be and the program should be. It's all my logic in there, but I can't. It would take me 20 minutes to sit down and figure out what program I should do next, if I did it by hand.
Right.
Because it's like, hey, this one bit of information pushes you to this program. Oh, but this other bit of information pushes you more towards this program. What about this? So there's like 20 bits of information that are pushing you in all different directions. So you've kind of like a weighted average to say, right, well, this is the best. It's not as simple as, hey, here's one number. If this is bigger or smaller, then therefore you go to this program.
That's crazy. Did you write all the code, and did you do all that, or did you have somebody write the program?
Yeah. So I write all the code in my own programming language, but then we've got this awesome app guy, Roger, who did the iPing app and the TrackMan app.
Gotcha.
So he's super qualified as a programmer. So I'm like, and he's been so fun to work with. I'm like, hey, here are my ideas. Here are the algorithms, and boom, he puts them into the app, and he just basically converts them into the iOS programming language, which blanking on at the moment. But even like we've got this super awesome putting, stack putting coming out now that's going to be free. I'm more excited about the stack putting. Sorry, I'm rambling, Jason.
No, you're perfect.
With our app guy.
Yeah.
And so I've worked on a lot of other apps in golf, and it can be beyond painful. Trying to translate what you want to have happen and have them like, oh yeah, I can do that. But this Roger's amazing. So in this putting app, I won't get into too many details, but there's a feature that allows you to do statistical comparison. So we run you through guided. You put your phone in your pocket, you put the earbuds in, and it works you around a putting green, tells you what putts to hit, keeps track of your stats. And at the start, you can plug in the ball you're using, the putter you're using, a technique. Could be a thought, could be like a line on the ball. You can put these factors in, super simple to do. So you can be like, oh, I'm going to do this stack putting session using this one putter for 3 sessions, over the course of the week. And I'll try this other putter, or left hand low versus, normal grip. And then you can go in and go to this feature in the app, and you can do this statistical comparison. You're like, I want to compare my answer 4 to this Odyssey. Hit compare, and it legitimately runs a statistical analysis with a probability. So it'll tell you, like, I immediately thought of like Xander Schauffele when he switched. Remember, he's like, oh no, left hand low is definitely better. And then it never ever worked out in competition. His strokes gained putting dropped. So all I could think of was like, and maybe they did do it right. But all I could think of was like, did you just hit 10 putts? And you're like, hey, more seem to be going in. Or this feels better, because like doing stats for putting is like you need a lot of data, and so
tell me.
So yeah, then you can just hit this button, and you're like, shit, this way is better. Yeah.
How important has Marty Jertson been to the process? I mean, that would be a nice little
Yeah, wouldn't happen for
Communication.
sure.
Yeah.
It
I know
just
you've
would
talked
not.
about him. Yeah. Give him a little shout out.
Oh God. Well, so I pitched the idea. So I was like, all right, this is the theory's solid, the research is good. I know this works. It's kind of embarrassing bringing stuff I made at Home Depot with washers to a tour player and an Excel spreadsheet. It's painful for me. I'm like, you know what? There might be a commercial opportunity here. Like it needs an app. We need to know club head speed. So, and I need this really, I can't use washers anymore. And, an old driver shaft. I had Jason Day. I was, some of these protocols, one of the first people I used it with was Jason Day with his trainer, Kevin Duffy.
Hmm.
I don't know if Kevin's not in the golf space anymore. I think he's starting to do more with boxers, but he was trained Lee Westwood, Jason Day, a bunch of guys, Graham McDowell. And so I had this like camera case with like these awkward weights, and had to have Kevin go to the ping van at his tour stop to get like a ping adapter put on the shaft so these you could put these weights on. I was like, this is not going, this is not going to take off. But I don't know anybody in Asia to reach out to as a supplier. So anyway, I pitched it to Ping. Or sorry, I should say that I had Paul Wood. They have Ping's got this
Yeah.
system where they can if any of their engineers have good ideas. But Ping's like, we don't have a training aid department. I didn't want to work with anybody else, so I was like, okay, well, this isn't really going to take off. Marty wasn't always super fast, so I did a training program for him with some deadlifts and some of the speed training stuff, and his speed went through the roof.
Hmm.
So he's like, man, I'm in. This works. He's like, hey, can I do this on Monday evenings? Ask the John A. Ping, can I do this on Monday evenings? If you guys don't want to do it, and they're like, yeah, sure. Ping's got such a great environment. Just a great atmosphere of
Hmm.
inventing and helping each other out. It's really a family, and so Marty's like, all right, let's do this on Monday evening. So he designed the stack. He came up with what the end piece should look like and what the weight should be. I'm like, these are the specifications I need, right? I need to be able to, cover this range of moment of inertias and masses and center mass locations. And so we figured out on this 42-inch length hybrid, it's better. It's better for the loading scenarios, but it's also better because you can swing it on the plane of your driver.
Hmm.
It's really important that you're not sticking this thing in the ground to
It's a
avoid
length of a
injuries.
hybrid, right? As I said.
It's the length of
Yeah.
a hybrid, but you
Right.
swing it at the same swing plane. You swing it like your driver, but that
Right.
gives you
Above
like
the ground.
yeah, it gives you like
Yeah.
a 3-inch clearance. You don't
Hmm.
hit it in the ground, but it also optimized our loadings. The weights we put on gives us the right moments of inertia and center mass location. So Marty designed the shaft himself. So sent the engineering specs to the supplier. Like here's the shaft we want. And he's the one that hooked us up with with Roger, right? So it just
Perfect.
wouldn't happen. It was way too many things that I had no knowledge in. So we are running a crazy tight ship at the Stack System. We are all highly expertise in our own areas, and we have this really neat Venn diagram. We just overlap enough, like I know a little bit about programming, but really the
Hmm.
biomechanics and the theory. And I work with some tour players, and Marty's got the engineering down. He's really good with the business side of things. So um, anyway, knock on wood, it's and then it gives me the opportunity. I've got so many cool ideas, but you need a platform to do it. So like this stack putting, it's like, all right, we've got an app to do this really cool putting stuff. It's like, oh, why are you putting in with the speed training? Well, because it's fun and it's going to make people better. And
Yeah. I'm all
yeah,
in. Yeah. I can't wait to see that because I'm kind of a low key putting guy, as you know. So
that's an understatement.
that's it's gonna be cool. All right. So let's get to some listener questions. Some of our friends, fans of yours, and then we'll get to some other stuff if we have time. But the first one we talked about before, Steve Moore, good young coach in Canada, actually. He asks, as a professor, what theory or hypothesis that you have presented have students struggled to grasp the most, and how in a learning concept or context did he adjust or you adjust to that challenge?
Um, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I'm assuming he doesn't. I'm assuming he means like any kind of student in any situation. I'm gonna use.
Yeah. I think it's just a learning,
Yeah,
teaching type of question.
yeah. So I'm gonna go with just teaching anybody, golf instructors or my biomechanics students. I'm a prof at a university, teaching them the concept of acceleration. It's such an important concept, and I think it's important when it's the one that people struggle with a ton.
Yeah, I think that's a
And
great point because I want to ask you that about putting too. So we can
yeah,
use that as far
okay.
as that goes too.
So I think it's really important to understand why is it a challenge to understand this? So with that acceleration, there's two reasons why it's really tough to understand. One, um, is that we've got it jammed in a place in our brain that's also occupied by speed. So when we say like in everyday language, man, see that acceleration, and we immediately picture something moving super fast.
Right.
He's got crazy clubhead acceleration, and we picture something moving super fast. Wow, did you see how fast that was going? Must have been really accelerating. So it's the same thing in our brain to start out with. So that we're behind the eight ball there. And then also we can't see it. You can't see acceleration. We're not hardwired. It's not in our ability to look at two things and go, object A is accelerating faster than object B. We can see position. Hey, something's over there and something's over there. They're not in the same space in the world. We can see velocity. You can look at two things and go, that thing's moving faster than that thing. And what I do to demonstrate this to students, most of them know, and this is a third year university class, what acceleration is. So you throw something up in the air, and the golf instructor might not know this, but it's freely Googleable. As soon as it leaves your hand, it has an acceleration that's not changing. It's negative 9.81 meters per second down. So as soon as you throw a golf ball, toss it straight up in front of you, during that entire motion, its acceleration is staying the same vertically. Yet you can't see, you'd never look at that golf ball and say that its vertical acceleration is the same, right? There's no
Yeah.
way you would do that. You can't see it. And so, okay, once you realize that you can't see, you actually have to, and even if you look at the classroom I teach in, if we open up the windows, there's big windows along one side, you can see an intersection. And we can see cars stop and go through the intersection. And you can see ones that don't stop, boom, so they're driving through, and then there's one that's just getting going. I'm like, can you tell which one's accelerating more? And the students initially, oh, the car that's going fast. I'm like, no, that car that's going fast has zero acceleration.
Yeah.
The car that's just creeping through that's starting has a really high acceleration. But you have to be able to then say, then I use math. I actually use math where you can't see acceleration. You have to do a computation. You have to take information, do something with it, digest it, and then come to a logical conclusion. So acceleration's change in velocity. So I'll say, hey, see that red car that's currently moving through the intersection there. What's its, how fast is it going on one side of the intersection? Oh, 20 miles an hour. Well, how fast is it going on the other side? Probably 20 miles an hour. Like, okay, 20 minus 20 divided by the second that it went through there, 0 divided by 1, you're at 0 acceleration. Okay, well, what about this car that was at a stop and starts going? What's its velocity, while the light is red? Well, 0. And how fast do you think it's going when it gets to the other side? Oh, maybe 5 miles an hour. Okay, 5 minus 0, now you've got some positive acceleration.
That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, we can all do simple subtraction and division. And whether you can't see it, you might not have a spot for it in your brain. You understand that it's not going to be easy and that you actually have to do some thinking to determine the acceleration of something.
Yeah, I always say it's the rate of change. Is that fair? Of the speed? Because I use it in, I'm with putting, I use Sam Putt Lab, obviously.
Yep.
And quick backstory, when I first got Putt Lab, that was one of the biggest things, talking to like David Orr and some guys that I've worked with or mentored from that have been teaching putting for a long time. That was one of the biggest eye openers when I started testing really, really good putters is constant acceleration versus a decreasing rate of acceleration. And then the poor putters were over accelerating, right? Our club golfers. right? So being able to explain that to a club golfer is difficult, right? So I remember I did the Ping VIP week a few years ago. It's been several years ago, and I talked to Paul Wood, and I said, what's the correct scientific definition of what I'm trying to describe? And he said, decreasing the putter is accelerating, but at a decreasing rate. When you see the sand putt lab going downward, right, towards impact, and that's the way.
Not negative.
Exactly, but it's going down, so it's accelerating. Obviously, it's still going forward at a decreasing rate. So that's always kind of stuck with me. That is awesome.
Your foot is still on the gas,
right?
But you're letting up.
There you go.
But the gas pedal is still depressed. It's gone from being really depressed to less depressed, but it's still depressed.
Yeah, I said because everybody's everybody had the average golfer that leaves a putt short or whatever, they always say I decel, and I'm like, no, not really. Like in actuality, you didn't decel and be going backwards, right? Yeah. So that's I'm glad you brought that up. That is so cool, the way you described that.
Yes, you have to realize why it's a tough concept, right? You can't see it. It's jammed in your brain with speed, and then once you understand that, then you can start to address those issues.
So good. All right. Question number 2 from James Hong, our buddy, the Honger.
Blame the Hong.
Blame the Hong. He says we all know and understand the basics of the 3 forces: horizontal, vertical, and rotational. How many different forms of application have you seen for each of them? And he says, example for horizontal, pushing in the lead foot. We've talked a little bit about that already. With what you did with Matthew. Lead hip towards target. Are there any that were poor applications that maybe we should avoid telling players to do?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably very situational dependent, so I got nothing really interesting to say there. But I do. Since we're in the weeds, this is Weed City.
Let's get it.
I don't think of rotational. I don't think of it as vertical, horizontal, rotational. It's never made any sense to me. To me, I don't even know what a rotational force is. That doesn't even compute in my head. We can generate angular momentum in the vertical plane, and we can generate angular momentum in the horizontal plane. And we need to determine how we can use the ground to change both of those things. How can we apply forces to the ground so the ground applies forces back to us such that those forces don't pass through our center of mass and they create angular momentum. So
angular momentum to the club, you're saying, right? Or you're just saying angular momentum to what our body's doing?
System. Yeah.
Okay, the system. Okay.
So if you're like, the famous Como off the diving board, and that was me. I probably, spent maybe, I don't know, 300 or 400 hours talking to Chris Como over the last 6 years. A lot more earlier on. Now our conversations are perhaps a bit more goofy. But I remember just having this conversation with man. I was like, well, you should probably, you could be in free fall, you won't be able to generate angular momentum. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to the diving board. And I was like, oh, that'd be the way to do it. And then he did
or jump out of a plane, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So the reason why we use the ground is to change for clubhead speed, is to change the amount of angular momentum in the system. So if you jump off a diving board, fall out of a plane, if you can on the ground swing the club at 100 miles an hour with the driver, and then you drop it out of a plane, best case scenario is you might be able to get it up to 60 miles per hour. That other 40 is really important, right? So we want to use the ground in a way that changes the angular momentum of the system, both us and the club. That's the system.
Right.
And then do our best to get that angular momentum that's in the body out to the club so that we can have angular momentum in the club that hopefully results in a clubhead speed that's faster than 60 miles per hour. And so that's how the physics work. And then you say, right, okay, I can change the angular momentum in the vertical plane. I can change the angular momentum in the horizontal plane. How do I use the ground to do that? So having a conversation about, vertical forces or horizontal forces without understanding how they pass through the golfer's center of mass is not particularly helpful. You could increase your vertical forces, but if they go through the center of mass, you've done nothing to change your angular momentum. So I don't even care how big your vertical forces are.
What would a swing look like? What would an example of a swing look like for somebody that did that, if you can describe it?
There would be no rotation and they would just jump straight up. So if you just do a vertical jump.
Yeah, or like lean forward.
Yep. I think I tweeted, if you go through my tweets, I tweeted 2 videos of my daughter. One's doing a backflip. So her science fair project was science of the backflip. So I had her all markered up on the force plates, tracking her center of mass. It's worth going through my Twitter media to find it. Yeah. But it's a great one for this conversation we're having now, because with the vertical jump, that ground reaction force goes right through the center of mass. You're not trying to create any angular momentum. When you're doing a backflip, you need a lot of angular momentum. So you need that vertical force to not pass through the center of mass. If we're talking about using the ground in golf, I need to know where those vertical forces are passing relative to your center mass so I can determine how much angular momentum you're generating in the vertical point. Yeah. So, and I don't even know what I've never known what a rotational force is. It's like kind of like an oxymoron. Forces are linear, and when those forces don't pass through something, then they create a torque. Torques are rotational, forces are linear. So that's my pet peeve of the day. Sorry, James. I didn't answer your question, but I gave some value added stuff there.
No, definitely, for sure. All right. This kind of goes along with, this is a body track user question. Jake Tolliver asks, when there is a visible backup in the COP trace, is that typically caused by the application of vertical force by the lead leg? He said that's sort of been his assumption, but would be a cool talking point.
Yeah, for a good golfer, if you got high club head speed, it's very common to see the center of pressure back up, even though the center of mass is going forward. It is a function of the force under the lead foot, but the force under the lead foot that's happened earlier in the downswing.
Right. Is that more like the driver, like the Z trace we see a lot of times?
Yeah.
Goes forward and then backward really fast.
Yeah, that's right. So you're going to see that force under the lead foot start to build really quickly in the downswing, peak somewhere after shaft vertical. And because that force was so high, that's going to launch the lead side into the air. So you have very, very little pressure under that lead foot heading into impact. And also not very much under the trail foot, but relatively so more. So you might have 2 pounds under the lead foot, but you got 10 pounds under the trail foot, both low forces in a golf swing, vertical forces, then the center pressure is going to be quite a bit back towards the trail foot.
Gotcha.
Now, what you don't want to have happen is then after impact, continue to see a lot of force under the trail foot. You're going to be hanging back, and that's probably suboptimal. So it's really important in transition to be pushing horizontally to get enough motion in that center of mass, enough impulse in that center of mass to have it traveling towards the target, so that even though your center of pressure shifts forward to get ahead of the center of mass will continue to still move forward. You know what I mean?
It's just the relationship of the COM and the COP. Yeah. That was one of my questions earlier. We were going to talk about ground reaction forces, but we kind of already went into it about from P4.5 to P6, that gas pedal move or the running backwards move. I think we talked about it at that dinner. You called it the almost like picking up a dumbbell, like if you're getting ready to do a deadlift, right? When that player kind of goes into that sort of little mini squat, right? So the pelvis is moving towards the target, but also your knees, I would say the knees kind of line back up. We were talking about my son's swing, which we can chat about off.
Oh yeah, because he pushes forward with both feet. He's got both feet jump back a bit. Yeah.
Right. And his right leg kind of straightens out like too soon. So we talked about maybe some speed production loss there.
I had an interesting, just on that, an interesting concept idea thought from a guy named Billy Getty, who's a bit of a golf nut himself. But he said, hey, it's kind of like in the golf swing, it's like you're doing a squat with the lead leg and a deadlift with the trail leg. I was like, yeah, it's pretty good.
I like that.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's see. There was one more from Honger that I didn't get to. It was a cross-referencing with other sports question, like which sport seems to be the best reference to create those forces. And I thought it was a good, I would add the questions like, what are some of your, we just talked briefly about it. What are your best metaphors that you use in coaching? Like I use sidearm throw for a trail arm movement in the downswing.
Yeah, skipping a stone.
Yeah, skipping a stone. Like what are some of the ones you like to use other than what we've discussed?
I use squash a lot. It depends on what I like whatever start asking what sport the player plays. Squash is a good one if like along with that skipping a stone analogy. Baseball is a pretty good one. A lot of kids play baseball, and sometimes like, well, it's like baseball, but then you just modify this a little bit, right?
Right.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of hockey references. I'll go the other way.
Interesting.
Yeah. To me, it's fundamentally a different objective. Golf is more like a throw. At impact, you could let go of the club, and the ball doesn't care. Hockey, it's all about how fast the club head's moving at impact. Hockey, it is the exact opposite. It doesn't really matter how fast the stick is moving when it hits the ice. What does matter is how much force you're applying when it's hitting the ice and the puck. So it's the exact opposite. You need a ton of tension in the arms and hands when you're taking a slap shot or a wrist shot or a snap shot, and you don't need any in golf. I'm not saying you can have some tension, and maybe you can still play golf, but you definitely need it in hockey, and you don't need it in golf. And in hockey, you're hitting, hands are moving down, down, down when you make impact. Golf, they're not moving down. Anyway, so it's funny. I coach hockey a little bit. My son's 11, and I'll have some of the hockey coaches be like, "Hey, I don't know. I guess they think these kids. They use the reverse analogy, like, oh, anybody play golf? It's like golf. You really want to be like flexing that shaft at impact, And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, no, this is terrible. It's opposite. What are you doing? Anyway.
Yeah, I've had, we got a lot of Canadians in my club, and they all tend to have really internally rotated trail shoulders at the top of their backswing. And then they hit, and they're super steep, and they hit down like a massive amount. And I was like, man, I had the wrong idea about hitting a hockey shot, because I thought they would be shallower coming in, but they're not.
No, you want to slam that stick, and you want to hit it crazy fat. You're hitting way behind the puck.
Yeah.
Flexing, getting maximum flex in the stick, as you're impacting the ground, as you're impacting the ice. Yeah, if you've ever watched, there's an interesting Tiger did like a 1-day clinic in Toronto, and someone gave him a hockey stick. And it was like he swung the hockey stick like a golf club, and it was disastrous. And then Como's living room lab, he had a hockey net set up with Bryson taking slap shots, and it was like, all you have to do is go, Bryson just hit a drive with a ball speed of 208 miles an hour, and I could catch the puck with my bare hand. So it's like, okay, there's not a ton of transfer going on here,
That's awesome. All right, so let's close with a little putting and short game.
Okay.
I mean, I know you've done some research on putting, because that's what I'm really interested in. Talk about some of the studies that you've done. I'm curious to know if you've done anything with forces and torques, but I know you've done a study with face angle versus address. I've heard you talk about that a little bit, but any research that you've been doing and any findings that
Man,
you've noticed?
I got more putting stuff than anything else in golf.
Let's
So
go.
you better. Well, why why don't you pick something, and I'll tell you what I know about it.
um,
What are you interested in? That'll make the
I mean,
conversation
really, I
flow
mean,
better.
the two what I would call the most official research projects that I've ever been a part of, and again, you'd probably pick it apart. That's why I kind of asked the question about like a proper study. I did with PGM students. I did it twice, and we did over 100 kids, and we tested. We basically gave them an intention of stopping the ball a certain distance, and there was like 3 different distances, and then we captured them all on Sam Putt Lab, and I was curious about the movement dynamics screen, which is the speed versus acceleration screen on Sam Putt Lab, and I wanted to know what profile performed the best. So, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you done any studies on the speed versus acceleration of the putter and what produced? Because I think the most difficult thing that we as putting coaches have to teach is touch.
Yeah,
And that's what I'm more curious about probably than anything.
yeah. So I will say this. Uh, I've seen zero correlation, and maybe I haven't never done a study explicitly looking at this, but I've probably done maybe, I don't know, 15 putting studies where we're like, hey, heads up, heads down, mostly different putters, right? So let's say you're looking at a toe balanced or a face balanced or a toe hang or offset or non-offset, or I just did a study on shaft stiffness in putters for Bernie Adams. So you get all this data. Some guys are awesome putters. Some guys aren't awesome putters. And then you can go, right, well, I'm always looking at, well, what matters in putting performance, right? So why did participant 1 sink 90% of his 11 footers and participant 2 only sank 40? And why did participant, 39 sink somewhere in the middle, right? So you can run correlations. So I've seen no correlation between the acceleration of the center of the putter face at impact and putting performance. It's like a shotgun splatter. So I've had, and also I've never measured anybody yet. Doesn't mean they don't exist, right? But maybe I've got 230 golfers through the lab measuring the forces and torques and the acceleration of the center of the face. I've never measured anybody who has an average acceleration at the center of the putter face that's negative. So no one's actually ever decelerating.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. But also I've got guys who sink, 90% of their 11 footers with really low acceleration, and some guys have the highest acceleration. They sink everything.
Yeah.
It's just like a scatter plot. Now, maybe that's not the case. But I just haven't seen the data yet. But
yeah, I don't think, and let me clarify that. Like that's only one piece of it, right? I mean, I'm not saying, I wouldn't say that the outcome that I wouldn't be judging the outcome on makes,
right?
Because there's so much more involved, right? You got green predict, you got to predict the break, and you got to aim it somewhere, and you got to start it somewhere. Like I think that touch is just 1/3 of it. But I think I'm just more like, I guess, as far as like controlling speed, if you've ever done anything, because we didn't use a hole, right? It wasn't about, did you make it or miss it? It's like, can you stop? Like one of my number one skill that I tell every time I give a putting lesson, I got this from Chris Como, John Graham, guys that I've learned from. Can you stop the ball where you want to stop it? Right. I mean, I think that's huge. But that's not everything. You could be great at that and not make any putts if you're terrible at aiming the putter and starting it and then can't read a green, right? So that's why I love putting, because it's a moving environmental problem every putt.
So what I do is I do in 90% of my putting studies is I do whatever I can usually to remove green reading, because
right,
I feel like
just make them a straight putt
or
give them the answer. Yeah,
that they know the break to.
Right.
And I do that because I think green reading accounts for about 50% of putting variability. So it predicts about 50% of the difference in performance, or why you make a putt or don't make a putt is like,
Hmm.
man, I'm no good at reading a green. If you give, well, perfect example is 8 footers on tour, it's 50%.
Right.
You give someone, even if it breaks, you give a tour player an 8 footer that they have to aim outside the hole, but they know they have to aim outside the hole, they're probably 90%, right? So that's like, okay, well, why are they 90%, versus 50%? They didn't know that aim outside the hole, right? They
Right.
misread the putt.
Yeah.
Um, I try to make sure that I take green reading out of it. So that you asked about conducting a research study, so we'll weave some of that in. There's two things that you want to try and do to make a conclusion from a study helpful. You want to maximize internal validity, which means that the result you found was definitely due to the way you set up the study. So if I'm testing intent, I want to make sure that if what were you so you had intent, you were like intent to give me the intent.
Stop it. It
So
would stop it on a string. Like basically, it was you had to putt to an 8 foot. I think it was an 8 foot string, a 15 foot string, and maybe a 20 foot string. I don't know. It was like there was an intent of stopping the
yep.
ball here, right? And then we calculated we looked at every single putt, and then we measured how close they were to that goal. And the best result was actually a decrease, and then we matched it up to what was their acceleration rate, right? So
Oh,
all we were basing it on was what acceleration profile matched up with the best result. And actually,
so you
decreasing acceleration rate was the best. Constant acceleration, which is kind of a flat graph, was second. And then over accelerating, which you get the big double humpers, those are the worst. So that's what our study was.
so you would have done, so I would say that's not technically that's not an experiment.
Okay.
It's not like a scientific experiment where you're manipulating a variable, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
You are finding a correlation between, hey, it seems like these people do with this one variable, they're like this, they have low acceleration, these people have high accelerations, and we see a difference in performance.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not cause and effect. Now, I would still believe it, because hey, that's great. There's a trend there, right?
Yeah,
But
that's
I would
probably
say,
fair.
yeah. But so there's nothing wrong with what you did. I'm not.
No, I had no clue what we were doing. We just felt like this was going to help us find
Right,
something, and we found out
right.
nothing.
So okay, so let me give you an example of that where it's like, hey, we want to predict. Hey, let's measure, and this is a common one in stats books. Hey, we're gonna. This is actual true story from the Department of Education. Hey, we want to, know if we can predict how. Uh, it's telling me to leave, but I'm going to tell them I'm still around. How's that? Yep,
Yeah,
I'm still here.
yeah.
Um, so, hey, we got all these math scores from students, and let's run a bunch of correlations. How can we predict math score? Holy shit, there's this really high correlation with shoe size. All the kids in the states that have bigger feet do better in math, right? Because you did this correlation. Look, here it is. And then someone's like, yeah, but you guys got kids in grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 doing the same math test. So it wasn't that they had bigger shoes, is that they were older and they did spend more time doing math. Right?
Yeah.
So, and this is not easy to do in golf, but if you wanted to say, okay, I'm gonna try to teach these players to have better acceleration. I'm going to try to change their acceleration profile to this, do a pre-test, a post-test. I'm going to have another group where I try to have the opposite acceleration profile. So I have them practice until they get that, pre-test, post-test. And then a
Mm,
third group where I just have them go read Golf Digest and we do a pre-test and a post-test.
okay. Yeah.
Right? So now you can attribute, if you find a difference, you're like, hey, look, these people that have changed their acceleration profile to this or practice with this type of acceleration profile, they ended up putting better in the post test. And hopefully we saw no difference with the people who just read the Golf Digest article.
Right.
Well, maybe not, hopefully not. But, you know, and so
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's an experimental design.
Like I know how to change it. I know how
Right.
to change an over accelerator to a constant acceleration profile. And I've seen the results. So obviously that's how we are as teachers, is we start seeing a pattern, and that's what we sort of believe is the way to go.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's
Yeah.
great, you know, and because not everybody can do a scientific experiment. But if you're really curious, what I would do, and I've said this actually to um, Mike Adams. He's
We
very
talked about that. Yeah.
yeah. So Mike is very interested in science and making sure he's doing the right thing. And if he's doing something that's not optimal, he wants to know about it. So he's like, hey, they've got the screens that they
Right.
do to fit people into rear post, center post, trail post, and,
Right.
and different screens for different things, over, under, side cover, that kind of stuff. And they're also really good at getting people faster. So, he'll have, hey, okay, come up on the lesson tee. Let's hit your 7-iron. It's 80 miles an hour. And he's got them up to 92 by the end of the session. But I'll say, okay, Mike, and love Mike, and I think he's a great instructor. So this is me just being critical. This is what I told him. I was like, all right, we have to rule out, first of all, the warm-up effect, right? So it's like, all right, we got to make sure that they're super warmed up, so probably at least 20 balls. And then we also, more importantly, have to rule out the Mike Adams effect, right? So he is just very charismatic. He's supportive. He gets the best out of people. So we'd have to get it set up on the range where every second person, you'd go through them in a day, and every second person, you'd have to, after they're warmed up, we've ruled out the warm-up effect, we'd have to get you to give them some cues that's going to do nothing to improve their club head speed. All right, this is, but you have to tell them and convince them that it will. Hey, look, we're going to have you just jam your tongue to the roof of your mouth, okay? And maybe that's a little crazy one, but something that, like, okay, I need you just to kind of turn your head a little bit more like Jack Nicklaus, or whatever it is, tighten your shoes. I don't care, whatever it is, but have just as much conviction. Like, all right, now, Jason, okay, we're going to go after this one, and I know that there is, he is helping golfers for sure. But if you actually wanted to make it scientific,
a proper scientific study,
that's what you'd have to do. Or
Yeah.
for the screens, you'd
Yeah.
say, okay, he works with Terry Rolls quite closely. He'd be like, all right, Terry, let's see if you guys are good. Terry's going to take these 10 guys to this end of the range and face north. Mike's going to face south. Terry's going to screen those 10. They're going to switch. Mike's going to, and do you guys come up with did you
Same
screen
answer.
them into the same answer? You know what I mean?
Yep.
But now,
Love to see that.
it's not really practical, right? And
Sure.
it's not really practical for you when you've got something that works, when you improve someone's putting stroke. But I would say, well, it doesn't, and in the end, it doesn't really matter. They got better. But then for you to maybe take the next step and say, I'm going to now teach people that this is how you make people better at putting. I'd want to know, is it just because they did a whole bunch of practicing? Maybe, even though maybe it wasn't your method, maybe it was just the fact that they practice putts. Maybe you're a really positive person. You made them feel really good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's,
No, I love it. No, that's great. Yeah. I'm always kind of looking to sort of put my stuff under the microscope, right? I mean, we all should be doing that. Like, what is this really what should be happening? I mean, I think that's why we got guys like you that actually measure the stuff. And it's like, all right. I mean, so much of the things that I teach now have been because of you and like Sinclair and, guys that are actually measuring stuff with devices, Yeah.
I do it. That's the way I run a heads-up putting study. So one of the best ones I did, it was over multiple days, 96 putts, and they're alternating between, participant 1 comes in, they're going to start with heads-up putting to these holes. Participant 2's starting heads down to the same holes. So it's a balanced design. Mm-hmm. You're switching 6 putts heads up, 6 putts heads down, equal number of 6-footers, equal number of putts that break left to right. Hit the same putt multiple times, so you take green reading of it, and in the end you get 96 putts. And I don't know, I've run the person through. I don't know what they've done better with. They don't know what they've done better with. And then you run the stats, and you're like, hey, heads up's better. And one thing that I do in the lab you mentioned make percentage. It's interesting. 11 feet is a really good distance where you can start to see people miss enough putts and make enough putts where you can start to see separations in a technique or a putter.
Mm-hmm.
If you gave everybody 4-footers, they sink them all. If
Yeah.
you give everybody
Crappy
20-footers,
strokes.
they don't sink enough, right?
Yeah.
So what I did, because I want to look at all different lengths of putts, 30-footers, 4-footers, is that I measure what the ball's doing when it goes in the hole. So even if I gave you an 8-footer and you sank 10 8-footers with answer 4 and you sank 10 8-footers with an answer 2, right? And you're like, well, which better? We can't tell. I'm measuring the ball speed when it goes in the hole. I'm also measuring what part of the hole it goes in. So I give a putt score for every putt. So even though you sank them all, I can tell you still which putter was better because it was closer to the optimal speed. It was closer to the center of the hole. You might have one that's like, they all went in, but one just died in the front edge. One was falling in the left edge. One was banging into the back of the cup. Whereas the other putter, they were all just pouring in the center at the perfect speed.
Yeah, I think it's always good to, like you said, do those projects, do those papers with things that kind of float around, like advice that floats around. And for me, with putting, the putter itself is always intriguing. And I read your paper on toe hang versus center or a face balanced putter.
Yeah.
And it's probably totally the opposite of what people are saying. Everybody's like toe hang putters, the putter's going to release, the toe's going to release. That's not the case. Like yours was, the toe's going to drag more. And I thought that was 2005. I think it was when you wrote that. It was no, I'm sorry. That was later on. The plumb bobbing was the 2005. That was before aim point. Cause I'm an aim point guy. I love that one because people come to me with plumb bobbing. I'm like, it's bullshit. Like, what are you doing?
We approached that one very scientifically. So plumb bobbing's terrible. But with the toe hang,
I think it was like 2013 or 12 or something. I mean, it was a little later.
That sounds about right. Did that one with Ping, and they have two models of putter that look very similar. Answer 4, answer 5. One's toe hang, one's face balance. And what's interesting is that you end up with a higher rate of closure with the toe hang. So it is, quote, releasing faster, which people may feel, but it never gets closed.
Yeah, it's late.
It's like, and we're talking like on average a degree, which is massive.
Huge.
It's late. So, so you take the putter back, and because you have that center mass off the shaft, there's a moment of force. Let's get a little bit that closes the face. So that with the toe hang, the face gets more closed on the way back. Then you start the forward stroke, and it starts to open up. So now it's way lagging behind the face balance putter. And then, whether it's consciously or subconsciously, rate of closure cranks up because like, shit, I got to close this face. Boom, there's the ball. Didn't get a chance to do it. And so that can be great, for people who tend to pull putts. Hey, let's move to a toe hang. Mm-hmm. What's interesting, I just finished, I was at Purdue University a few weeks ago presenting at the International Sports Engineering Association conference on putter offset. With an offset putter, you're more likely to hit the putt left.
Yeah. Well, you're going to aim more left. That's an aim bias.
Yes.
But I don't know if that has anything to do in your study, but.
No, absolutely. Yeah. So you hit the putt more left because you hit it with more loft. But both of those are because you set up with more loft and you set up aimed left.
Yeah, agree.
And then that persists throughout the stroke. So what's interesting is that if you're like, hey, I need to play a toe hang putter because I'm pulling them, but if that toe hang also has a ton of offset and maybe not a whole lot of toe hang, all of a sudden you're like, shit, I'm pulling it more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you you'd want to try to find a toe hang putter It doesn't have a whole lot of
Yeah,
offset.
like an S curve or a straight shaft.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Dude, I feel like we could go all night. Anything that is great. I haven't got to half my questions, but I'm conscious of your time. But anything else we haven't talked about? I mean, we haven't talked about rate of closure. I know that's been a hot topic that you're able to measure with your software.
Mm-hmm.
We talked a little bit about that. I know. I mean, you can kind of talk about that a little bit. I know what the outcome's going to be, but it's very interesting.
Yeah. The highlights is that to date, looked at a ton of data. Ping has a ton of data. There is no correlation between rate of closure and accuracy or face variability at impact.
Right.
So you can take a super low rate of closure player and a super high rate of closure
Victor
player.
Hovland, you're talking about, was the lowest rate of closure, I think, on tour.
Yep. And now he's one where you'd be like, oh yeah, well he's super low, and he hits it very straight. But then you got, like, if you look at some of Vijay Singh's driving stats, crazy high rate of closure, he was driving as straight as anybody when he was world number one.
Yeah.
So it's like, and there's plenty for every guy you'd find with a low rate of closure that hits it straight, you can find a guy with a high rate of closure that hits it straight, and a guy with a low rate of closure that hits it all over the planet. This is how I would sum up that for, this is one of my favorite thoughts to portray to people and in golf instructors in general about the minutia corrections you're doing to improve face to path variability. So that's really the holy grail.
Right. And that was like the topic was like, how do we get the functionality or repeatability of face to path, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like I'll have miniature players like, everything's going good. I just kind of need to get more repeatable with their face. It's like, yeah, shit. To me, that's like saying, I know why we're losing. We need to score more goals than the other team. You're right. That will do it. What have we been working on, right? I mean, if you have low face to path variability, you're winning at golf. And so, okay, let's do some. We also need a lot of club head speed, right? It's not, you can't like gently hit a full swing and win, golf at any level. You need to put a lot of effort into it, right? It's a full swing, okay? So you go, right, what can we do with this full swing to reduce that face to path variability? And you start to add on constraints, like, okay, let's keep the pressure forward. Let's not have a lot of sway. Let's close the face a little bit on the way down. Let's, change wrist angles. Let's do, think of all the things you might do to constrain someone. Hey, they might lose a little bit of club head speed. Let's shorten the backswing a little bit. Let's grip it a little bit tighter. All the things, every golf instructor listening to this has some thoughts about things you can do to, like, this guy will be a bit slower, but it'll be a fairway finder. He'll play more accurate. And then you could go so extreme that you get all the way down and think about the movement you make when you hit a 30-foot putt. That is constrained. There's relative to a full swing, you've got things buttoned down pretty good in a 30-foot putt. Very minimal head movement. From the waist down to the feet is about as locked in as you're going to get. There's not much change in anything, right?
Right.
In fact, some people like Hunter Mahan, he might just only have a little bit of rotation in the spine. Every other joint's frozen, essentially. Yet, the face-to-path variability on a 30-foot putt is about the same as the face-to-path variability on a drive.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same.
That's such a crazy topic. I mean, we can deep dive. It's just like, I mean, funny's like, not funny, but like quick story about, I mean, just knowing your player. Like I've taught my son since he was 3, right? Yeah. And he went through a little ball striking slump. It's been a couple months ago, and we just started looking at video, looking at data and this, and like, what the heck's different? And literally his club got a little more shut at the top. He's losing balls to the right. Okay. So logically you think, oh, well, just close the face. No, because it didn't allow him to have his sort of blueprint of release pattern with that face configuration, that constraint, right? So as soon as we got the face more open, then he could actually square it up, and he was back to normal. But it took
Yeah.
us a minute. It took us a minute to like figure it out. I'm like, what the heck? I mean, it like logically makes no sense of how many times we close in the face because the ball's going right.
Yep.
You don't know, right? I mean, it's just that's the fascinating thing about what we do.
Well, I remember it makes me think of, how someone like Tiger who would, okay, I'm playing a draw, and he'd say, well, I got to set up with it more open. I feel like I have
Yeah.
to fan it open because then it like this was his rationale, triggers me to be like, you got to close this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But maybe that wasn't it at all. Maybe it was a mechanical thing. It wasn't like a mental trigger. It was like, hey, it helped him actually close it more,
Yeah.
because of the positions he got into.
Exactly. So cool, man. Oh gosh, we're gonna have to do a part 2.
All right. I probably should have been on before now.
I know, you're right. That's on me. It's on me.
Cool.
Your Ford Dynamics model. I mean, you mentioned that I think in one of your latest podcasts. How's that coming along?
Yeah.
That sounds cool.
I probably should. The only time I've published anything from it was World Scientific Congress of Golf in Gold Coast. I kind of kept it to myself to answer a lot of fun questions. But 2 arms on the club. Only one out there. It's been since. Well, I guess it's been getting close to 10 years, and no one else has put one out there. So it's really helpful in answering. You can ask what if questions. So I did this really neat study looking at a flipper versus someone who had a John Rahm style swing. So I optimized a swing for a 7-iron, and I added in, so you had to have high club head speed, good face to path relationship. Got Eric Hendrickson at Ping to model the ball flight given those impact conditions, and they've got the best ball flight in the industry for sure. And go, okay, there's an optimal ball flight with a John Rahm type swing, with a little bit of shaft lean and impact.
Mm-hmm.
But then I said, you know what? We've all seen the really bad high handicapper flipper. Every once in a while, they can hit a great golf shot.
Right.
They just don't seem to do it a lot. The probability's lower.
Yeah.
Right? And you can even demo on the range. You've probably all done it where it's like, all right, I'm going to demo a flip. And you're like, shit, I flushed it. Right? You just happen, you're like, oh, that was pretty good. So I optimized the model to have same club head speed, essentially the same ball carry distance, but with a very flipped position at impact. Where the head is ahead of the hands, like the ugly position.
Yeah.
But both of these ball flights for one swing could win a lot of money in the PGA Tour. But then what I did was I said, okay, well, what happens when we actually hit a bad golf shot? Well, we've got a plan to turn on and off our muscles and activate our muscles in a certain way to make a golf swing. It doesn't always go to plan, right? Oh, shit, I forgot to fire my quad hard enough, or, maybe my wrist came on a bit soon. But that's what it is. A bad golf shot is our muscles not firing the way we had intended. Something goes a little too hard or a little too long, or or 2 muscles contract at the same time. So what I could do with this Ford Dynamics model, the flip swing and the John Rahm style swing. I'm saying John Rahm because he's got that awesome amount of shaft lean and impact. We can all picture it, right? Where he just compresses it. So I can take that swing. It's going to hit the exact same golf shot over and over and over again, unless I introduce some slight timing errors to those muscles. So I generate 10,000 little timing errors to those muscles, okay? When a muscle turns on, how long it's active for, etc. And I take those exact same timing errors and I apply them to both models. And then I look at those 10,000 swings and see what happens. And it's very clear that the John Rahm swing comes out with better results in terms of dispersion, carry distance, all these things. And then anyway, so that's an application of that Ford Dynamics model.
Anyway, little teaser. That's awesome. All right, you got to answer one more question. Everybody has to answer it at the end of the podcast. Is if you had to get a message to the world and you put it on a gigantic billboard, metaphorically speaking, of course, you could put a quote, you could put a mantra, you could put a picture, whatever you want. What would you put on your billboard and why?
Yeah, man, it's going to be some cliche thing because I like a lot of them.
That's all right. Anything that comes to mind.
Well, I guess it would be about being nice to people. I think that, just remember everybody could be having a bad day, right? So before you say something or about somebody or to somebody, I guess assume that they're having a really shitty time of things.
I love it. Yeah, it's a cat kicking world, as I always say.
Yeah.
Like when we get to students, a lot of times they've been through whatever and we don't realize, and they're in a bad mood, but we don't know why. So it's our job to sort of figure that out and make it better, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, dude, you make golf better. I can tell you that, and you've been a huge influence on my coaching, and I appreciate all your hard work and friendship and everything that you're putting out there. You're my guy, and I can't thank you enough for your time. We're gonna definitely have to do this again soon.
Cool. Awesome, man. Well, maybe I'll make a visit down to your neck of the woods.
Yeah, we need to do a school together. I'll have to come down to the Low Country and introduce you maybe this fall.
Cool. Awesome.
All right,
Thanks for having me on, Jason.
Absolutely. Tell people how they can get a hold of you. I didn't even give you a chance to give out your handles for social.
Yeah, I'm terrible at Instagram. Sorry, I can't. I don't have enough bandwidth, but I'm not pretty good at it. I'm decent at Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, Sasho Mackenzie on Twitter. I put out every now and again some cool stuff. You can flip through my profile. I think everybody learns something. I got a lot of cool animations and media and stuff like that. And please check out stacksystem.com. Stacksystem.com. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for your time. I'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
What's up, everyone? Guru back here again with a couple of things before you go. First, big thank you to Sasho for coming on the show and sharing his story and